Welcome to the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, Land Quality Division's Blasting Continuing Education Training. My name is Keith Gill. I'm the Public Information Officer for DEQ and today's moderator. Also with me today is Rio Barney, our Land Quality Division Blasting Program Manager. Before we begin, I want to remind all attendees that their microphone is automatically on mute. After each presentation has concluded, we will take questions and comments. To participate, you will need to raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon located on the GoToWebinar menu options. That should be on the right side of your screen. You can also type in a question in the question section of the GoToWebinar menu. So without further ado, let's get started. Rio, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
All right, can you see my screen? I want to double check.
We will get you in there, Rio. You do have the screen now, Rio.
Okay, good deal. All right, well, good morning. Like T said, my name is Rio Barney. I'd like to welcome you to the first installment of the Blaster Continuing Education Hours seminar. All right, just a quick reminder here. Thank you for joining on the webinar. Simply registering for the webinar just gives you access to the live class. To receive Blaster Continuing Education Hours, please fill out the affidavit of attendance. This must be filled out and signed returned after the conclusion of the webinar. I do apologize for not clarifying this. I did get a bunch of these ahead of the webinar. If you had sent this ahead of the webinar, just resend it after. This is just verifying that you attended the class. Here's the affidavit of attendance. Most of this is pretty self-explanatory. One thing, we originally had this scheduled for 3 hours. I had enough requests and support from everybody to take this to 4 hours, so it'll be 4 hours here for the class. Expectation is that you attend the entire 4-hour session, and if the emergency comes up or something like that, please note any exceptions here in this box. And here at the bottom, if you desire a blasting confirmation certificate, please indicate that here in this spot. This is not required for Wyoming blasters, as this will be on file in our system. I go through the quick itinerary for the day. We're going to start off with lightning and blast area safety from Nelson Brothers Mining Service. Tony Truchon will be giving that presentation. The next presentation will be public relations at the doorstep. OSM will be giving that presentation, and Ken Urschlager will be giving that. The next presentation will be calculation for powder factor and borehole rise. Nelson Brothers Mining Services will be giving that presentation, and Bobby Ingram will be giving that. And the last presentation today will be using scale distance from Dino Nobel, and Brad Brown will be giving that presentation. Again, there'll be approximately 4 hours for that. Here's the schedule for next week's session. If you would like, you can sign up for that. We don't quite have as many attendees for that yet. That'll be next Tuesday, and it'll start at 8:15. That's Mountain Time. Again, 4 hours. So overall, between today and next Tuesday, there'll be 4 hours today and 4 hours on the 30th. And then tentatively scheduled, we'll have another 4-hour session for a total of 12 hours. And why are we doing this? Well, truthfully, we had a blasting conference scheduled in April in Spearfish, South Dakota. Typically, blasters can get about 12 or 13 hours out of that conference, and that was scheduled. It was canceled due to the COVID-19. So I'm trying to replace some of the hours there. I typically give a short presentation at the Best and West Blasting Conference. That's one that got canceled. And I do some announcements for the blasting program. Obviously didn't have the opportunity this year, so I'm going to do some of those announcements now. This one, the Wyoming DEQ just had a blasting webpage go live yesterday. There's the address for it on the screen there, or you can just search Wyoming DEQ blasting. It's about the second or third selection down. On that, you can obviously get information on the program. We'll have the blaster application form and then upcoming class schedule. And there's an area to sign up for training notifications. And I plan on using a mail sending service for this notification. So they'll come from my email. All right, we got this is the Wyoming Blaster application form, just an updated form, but one of the major changes on this form, you have to select which surface mining endorsement you would like for blasting, either surface coal or surface non-coal. Here's the blasting certificate. This is a surface coal mining, and notice there's 4 signatures here for that. This is the surface non-coal mining, and there's only 2 signatures on that. That's really the only main difference. And if you desire both, if you need both types of certificates, please notify me and we can work with you on that. And a note here, due to COVID-19, all training records have been digitized. That makes it much easier to go back and search for training. So Wyoming Blaster certification class, it's a requirement. This is a class that I actually teach. This is a requirement for qualify for Wyoming Blaster certification. It's a 3-day class. Blasters also use this for continuing education. There's no charge for this class as well. And this one is not available through webinar format. Here's the blasting class schedule for this year. That I guess this is past now, but we had a class scheduled for Salt Lake City, Utah it's been canceled. And then we have another class in Gillette, Wyoming, July 14th through the 16th. We'll also have that class in Rock Springs later this summer, fall timeframe. Just run down on this past year, blasting related complaints. We had 10 vibration complaints through the state, and then 6 blasting emissions complaints. Enforcement action, I had 4 enforcement action due to blasting last year. Vibration related, had a sympathetic detonation, had a couple 100,000 pounds go off sympathetically. Also had a blasting notice not sent out on time, and then a violation of permit conditions for wind direction, and then fly rock on topsoil, which was a non-coal incident. Here's my contact information. Please let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns. I would be glad to help you. So, with that, that is then my presentation.
Thanks, Rio. So next up, then first up, we have Tony Truchon. He's going to be doing the lighting and blast area safety. He is from Nelson Brothers Mining Services.
Hello, everyone. I'm like Keith said, I'm Tony Truchon with Nelson Brothers Mining Service, and I sure appreciate the opportunity to present to you. Thanks to Rio and Keith as well for giving us this opportunity to do this via webinar. We internally, Nelson Brothers tries to do training, and with the COVID going on and our office policies, it's very, very difficult for us to get everyone in a room with masks and all that stuff. So this is a nice little treat for us to be able to extend our learning and get our blasters the hours that they need. So with that, my first one's going, I have 3 presentations. The first one's on lightning, and it's a unique one. It's not going to make you a better blaster, but when you're you present a bunch of stuff year in and year out. We were looking for something unique a couple of years ago, and lightning was an issue as far as what do you do and when do you react to lightning? I mean, there's nothing really written out there or no guidance on lightning. I mean, it's kind of a common sense deal, and sometimes you get a macho blaster in charge or something like that, and you might find yourself in in trouble or maybe reacting too late. So we put this together a few years ago. I've kind of updated a little bit, but having said that, this morning I looked and I was looking for some guidance at MSHA, and I found OSHA, and basically what it came up is OSHA said you need to recognize lightning as a hazard. Well, we all know that, but they do say that you need an emergency action plan, and it should be written. This is OSHA now, and the emergency action plan should include a written lightning safety protocol for outdoor workers, which includes blasters, obviously. This lightning safety protocol should inform supervisors and workers on how to take action after hearing thunder. You'll learn in my presentation, after hearing thunder, you're probably already in danger. So especially in our industry where it's not as easy as just spooling up, jumping in a truck and getting out of there. We have accessories, a bulk truck. We have other things we have to be concerned of, getting off pattern, trying to get, people, shovels out in front and all that evacuated. So we need a little more heads up. Then also on that, you're supposed to indicate how workers are notified about lightning safety warnings. Not a bad idea. Identify locations and requirements for safe shelters. Now that's a big one because you're out on pattern. Where do you go? Where do you take your accessories? What do you do with your bulk truck? All those things, if you address them beforehand, especially on a day like say today, if there's strong chance for thunderstorms, it's probably a good idea for the blaster in charge to address these things in a line out before our tailgate meeting. Just say, hey, if the storms as anticipated come in, this is what we're going to do, and specify approaches for determining when to suspend outdoor work activities and when to resume. And I'll go through all that in my presentation. Account for time required to evacuate customers and members or basically when to get out of there and everyone to a safe area off, away from a loaded pattern that causes, brings in an initial danger. And then employees, according to not MSHA, but OSHA, employees should also post this information to all outdoor work sites. So I found that today. I'm sorry the slide's kind of a little sloppy, but that I just found that today and threw it in there real quick. But it's a good guideline. So here's some lightning statistics and things to know about lightning. So it gives you you're more educated when to call it and say, hey, let's get to a place of safety. So first of all, maximum distance you can hear thunder is as short as 2 miles and rarely exceeds 12 miles. So obviously, once you hear thunder, you're already in immediate danger, and you probably should be making plans to get out of there. The average lightning bolt is 6 to 8 miles long and can easily travel 25 to 30 miles. And in October 2001, the Visual Lightning Detection System measured a single bolt that traveled from Waco to Fort Worth and then to Dallas, and that's 110 miles. So you can see that just because it's not overhead, you're still in danger, especially when you hear thunder. Well, I'll go over this probably more than once, but the very sound of thunder means that you're in immediate danger. When the leading edge of the storm is within 10 miles, you are at immediate risk due to lightning's outreach. And many lightning deaths and injuries occur with clear skies directly overhead. And that kind of sounds weird, but I had a situation a few years ago where I took some friends to my hometown, which is in southern Wyoming, and I had to show off my golf course down there, and we had a rain delay on the 7th hole. Well, the storm passed us. We didn't wait for the 30-minute after the last thunder that I'm going to go over here later, but we thought it was clear to go, and it was clear overhead. You could see the storm off to the east. We played the 8th hole, and on the 9th hole, we're heading west up towards the clubhouse. We all hit our drives, and just to the west of the clubhouse, there's a National Guard Armory. lightning hit that, and it was just an instant boom. You could smell it. I mean, it was the weirdest thing I've ever seen, but that was with clear skies overhead. We immediately turned around, headed back to the cart barn, which was behind us, and we left our Pro V1s out on the fairway, never to be retrieved. But that was really scary, and it makes the point that with clear skies, you are not out of danger. So make sure, and I'll go over this later, but make sure you wait 30 minutes after the last thunder you hear. Lightning can travel over the surface of the ground and through the ground. The ground surface can be lethal for a radius of 60 feet or more from the point of contact. And in water, of course, it's a better conductor. The lethal radius is about 600 feet from the point of contact. So that's good to know if you're boating and things like that, of course. But if you're out on a pattern that's wet, things like that, a lightning strike nearby is going to affect you. So when lightning occurs, evacuate all personnel until 30 minutes after you hear the last thunder. And like we went over, 50% of fatalities occur after the storm has passed. So on that, when you hear thunder and you wait 20 minutes and you hear thunder again, you start the clock over. So sometimes that can get frustrating, but make sure the storm is out of there. The danger of lightning is often under-publicized because it usually kills people one person at a time. So I guess if you're in a group and it hits, and then it gets more publicity. But in 2018, there were 82 lightning-related injuries and 20 fatalities. And in 2019, they also had 20 fatalities, but those are down from the average. The average from 2009 to 18, it's 27 per year. And you can find statistics out there that say it's more than that, but that seems to be the common number. But on average, only 10% of humans getting struck by lightning actually dies. So there's a lot more that get struck by lightning out there. Florida and Texas top the list of fatalities, but just to get Wyoming in there, we lead per capita because our population, of course, is 500,000. So, and then we also have, when we have tourist season, we're way over 500,000, and most of those tourists come in here and do outdoor activities like hiking and things like that. So that's why we get on the map. And here's the 2019 direct lightning deaths by state. And as you can see, true to what I said, Florida and Texas are right there. And I see we have a lot of people from all over the United States. You can kind of see where your state is or states that neighbor you. But around the Powder River Basin, we had one in Colorado and one up in North Dakota, but nothing in Wyoming. And then this is just more of a when to expect it. This will vary state to state, but typically for Wyoming, when you start getting into maybe a little bit March, probably not so much, but when you start getting into May, June, especially July and August, that's when we start getting our thunderstorms, and we need to really be aware of the weather forecast and what to expect that day. So how many lightning strikes were detected in 2017? We know the one statistic that kind of shocked me is the Earth is struck by lightning on an average of over 100 times per second. But in 2017, we had over 106 million lightning strikes just in the United States. So it's definitely out there. Lightning is 5 times hotter than the sun, which I didn't realize, and it can reach 53,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and the surface of the sun is just a little over 10,000. And then we'll get into some what you should do. No place outside is safe when a thunderstorm is in your area. So if you hear thunder, lightning is close enough to strike you. So when you hear thunder, if you're obviously probably reacting a little late because you're already in immediate danger, but that's when you need to find safe shelter. And a building with plumbing or an enclosed or electrical for grounding, or a metal top vehicle with the windows rolled up is another good place to go. Like I said, stay in safe shelter at least 30 minutes after you hear the last sound of thunder, and then after that you can proceed. Indoor lightning safety: stay off corded phones, computers, and other electrical equipment that puts you in danger. And avoid plumbing, including sinks, baths, and faucets. So when you're in a rainstorm, it's not a good idea to take a shower. Stay away from windows and doors, and stay off porches, because even though you're under a screened-in porch or something like that, you are still at risk of getting struck. So when you're in a house with plumbing and electrical, and don't go by windows, stay in the middle of the building, stay off all electrical equipment, and you should be fine. Also, do not lie on concrete floors and do not lean against concrete walls. So let's say you're outside hiking on a pattern or whatever, and you got caught, you didn't react in time, and there's no place to shelter. Immediately get off elevated areas. So I guess in our industry, if you're on top benches, things like that, figure out how to get to lower benches, areas of safety there. And then also, make sure a lot of our pits out here, and I'm sure everywhere, they will flood. And we've seen it many times where you see a shovel at the bottom of a pit flooded. Make sure you're not going to get out of lightning danger and then get into some place where you're going to encounter water. Never lie flat on the ground. Never shelter under an isolated tree. Never use a cliff or rocky overhang as shelter. And immediately get out away from ponds, lakes, other bodies of water, and stay away from objects that conduct electricity, like barbed wire fences, power lines, windmills, things like that. This kind of just another slide that reiterates it. One thing I want to do is talk about that do not lie on the ground, but you can crouch down with your heels touching, head between your knees and your ears covered. That'll minimize your contact with the ground. And like I said, do not lay down flat. And remember, when we were growing up, we used to always see lightning, then we count, and we'd always say, oh, I counted to 5, so the lightning's 5 miles away. Well, that's a myth. Here's a better way to determine that. So you count how many seconds pass between the flash of lightning and the sound of thunder. And if you want that in miles, divide that number by 5. If you want it in kilometers, divide it by 3. But that's a rough rule of thumb there. There's also a rule of thumb out there. It's called the 30-30 rule. When you see lightning and you count to 30, if you get past 30, they say you're okay for lightning. Or if you count past 30 and then you hear thunder, they say you're not in that great of risk. But I don't know if I agree with that. I'd go with the when you hear thunder, you're in danger, and start taking action. To continue with that, the idea that electronic devices and metal on your body attract lightning is a myth. So don't take the time to take out or remove those items. So don't take your piercings and things like that. But if you have, like, high pointy shapes, things like that are around you, get away from those. Or if you have something like antennas from a backpack or trekking poles, anything like that, those will attract lightning. So please, drop those, get away from them. Stay away from objects that could conduct electricity, as fences and power lines, like we went over. And if lightning strikes an object around you, and that you've probably all seen a tree get hit by lightning, things like that, there is shrapnel there. So make sure you're aware of that. Stay low, and finding protection can minimize the chance of injuries from debris. If you're in a group, crouch 20 feet apart to decrease the risk of multiple people getting struck. This has nothing to do really with lightning, but as I was putting this together, I thought this was kind of a cool. It does deal with electricity, what you should do in the down power line. So I'm going to show it anyway. It's not, maybe it'll help someone. I understand I might not have volume there. I'm sorry about that, but basically that video is just kind of show you that electricity can go through ground. You know, keeping your feet together is one good thing, and that actually staying in your car is a good place to shelter. So I know it's not super lightning related, but it kind of showed that. Plus, if you do hit a power line, it'll show you how to react when that happens. But on this slide here, what I wanted to do is kind of show you, you know, ask the question, when do you react on pattern? I mean, do you see the upper left? Is that when you react? Or do you wait till it builds a little more? Or do you wait till that bottom picture when everything's turned loose and you're trying to get accessories in your truck, things like that? So just something to think about. Make sure you stay ahead of the storm. One thing that we do at Nelson Brothers, and I wanted to show this. I'm running out of time for this presentation, but basically this is our storm detection network that we use. It's Earthworks. Earth Networks provides it to us. And what I do is I set up at different mines alerts when a storm is approaching. So basically I pick a spot. When you open this up, it'll give you the map of the United States. You zoom in on where your mine is, and the mines out here are pretty big. So you actually have several warnings for the same mine. You know, you can have the south, the north, and you know, anywhere in between, because believe it or not, it could be raining on the south side of a mine and be totally clear on the north side. So we set it up like that, and as lightning approaches whatever determination you make, I do 15-mile radiuses. When it starts approaching that, then I set it up to where the personnel in charge are notified. The problem with that is it's through text on your phone or it's through email, the notification. And of course, on pattern, you don't always have cell service, or you don't have access to your email. So the system works good, but it probably works better if you went like through your engineering department, someone that's always around the computer, or if you have dispatch at your mine. And maybe a lot of people probably already do this, but that's really the best place, is where if you have the dispatch looking at this, and when those alerts start coming in, then they can notify people of storms coming in their area, and they can react accordingly. So it's a nice system. I have it at 2 of the mines that I do. One thing you have to do is you have to make sure that you put in the rules in there. When I first did this, just to show people how it worked, I put in lightning coming towards a golf course here in Gillette, and everyone that golfed got those notifications. Well, they were getting them at midnight and things like that, so people were not that impressed until I turned off the, only to throw those messages at certain hours of the day and things like that. So on that, I'll just go ahead and jump into the next, and we can ask all the questions towards the end. I'll jump into my next slideshow because I'm running a little behind here, but my next will be on fly rock. Let me get up here quickly. And this is more blast related, so this, oh, come on. There we go. So preventing fly rock incidents, and this will go over fly rock causes and prevention, and then we'll also get into some blast area security on this. So fly rock is the major cause of all blasting related accidents, and that's the one thing as a blaster in charge that scares everyone. You don't, even if you do everything perfectly, when you hit the trigger, you never know exactly what's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, you can hope for the best, but equipment damage, getting someone hurt, and a fatality, that's the one thing that we're all very, very afraid of. So we'll go through some ways to prevent that and to minimize your risks. So first of all, we're going to go over some incidents here. Here, a 63-year-old with 16 years of experience was killed. He was taking video with his phone while initiating the blast. The victim was standing 153 feet from the blast, and the largest rock striking the victim was 96 pounds. And there's the area that he was at. Now, on this one, it's, who knows, 153 feet. Everyone listening to this knows that's way too close to be sitting. But they probably had blasts in this area that were very controlled, and everything went well. So he got basically felt comfortable at that distance, and like I said, he probably did everything perfect on this blast, but unfortunately the unexpected happened. Here's another one that happened in 2013 at a crushed stone mine. This victim was 61 years old with 24 years of experience, operating a front end loader at the face of the blast, and the victim was discovered 10 hours after the blast. Blasting procedures were not followed and warning signals were not used. And that's basically what happened. So obviously the plan was not, hopefully they had a blasting plan that was better than this. The area was not secured, cleared out. So this guy probably didn't even know what hit him, but that one's really scary. Then here, this is an underground, but a victim, 62 years old, 20 years experience, where he died, but 2 miners were actually struck. The second one was hospitalized. The victim was 25 feet from the face of the blast, and there was an unplanned delay in this scenario, and deteriorated explosives were involved, and basically the miners did not follow the proper wait times for suspected misfire. So there was a misfire causing a delay. All sorts of things went wrong here, and basically they walked in there when it fired, and you can see that wasn't a good deal. But if you notice, all 3 of those, everyone had experience. Everyone was, of the age where, so I don't know if they were getting complacent, just too comfortable with what they're doing. it's hard to tell, but I found that kind of weird that they're all experienced older people that, you know, probably been around this a long time and should have known better. So going over the wait times for misfires, since we brought that up, when you're using cap and fuse, that's 30 minutes on a misfire. Electrics 15, non-electrics 15, and electronics 30 minutes for some reason. And then suspected burning holes 1 hour before reentry, and that's an MSHA standard. So let's get into what causes fly rock and what we can do to avoid it. So first one is excessive burden. Right there you can see from the face, the drill hole's too far back, and that's the energy is going to go straight up through your stimming. Next one is insufficient burden. That's more of what you see, and that's, you don't have enough face burden. It's going to go right out of the face. Those are the ones that are really scary. Those fly forever. And this is an example of the insufficient burden. So hopefully no one was around that camera. Hopefully they just set it up and got out of there, but you can see how that one went awry in a hurry. Here's one that's more local, and I don't know how good the video is here, but you can kind of, before I hit play here, you can kind of see where it's going to be right in this area. You can see with the pattern, there was some sloughing here. So on a situation like this, before you shoot this, it's really good, especially if a shot's been sitting for a long time. It's good to go check your face, make sure there's no sloughing or something hasn't changed, you know, with water, weather, geology, whatever. You know, what you loaded to yesterday may not be what you're shooting to today. So make sure that, you know, in this case, we probably could have timed it different or taken that hole out or something so it doesn't fly, but I'll show it to you and you can see what happens. Now we'll play it in slow motion. You can see now that something like that probably could have been avoided just by, you know, inspecting your area before shooting, going down, looking at it, and then once you notice that there could be an issue with the sloughing, you know, address it. And if you're not quite sure, bring some other people in, make a group decision, educated decision. Soft zones. This is one that we see in the Powder River Basin, where as you're drilling, you'll have different geology going through, and you'll run into, let's say, a rider seam, something like that. A good place for the energy to escape easily. Sometimes you have to address those, look at those, and sometimes you have to deck through them, or, you know, just for safety reasons, also just to make the blast more efficient, get the fragmentation where you want it, instead of losing all that energy out through the soft zone. Insufficient stimming, and this is one everyone thinks of with fly rock. In the Powder River Basin, our stimming is horrible. It's just, we just basically use the drill cuttings, and we're drilling through real soft rock and things like that. I know at quarries and things like that, they have better stimming, but it's an issue everywhere. But out here specifically, you need to really pay attention to your stimming. Make sure that you're getting adequate stimming in there. And here's kind of this comes from the Atlas powder, but kind of the optimum burden. And as you can see, when you go through, start off to the left at A there, you know, you have too much stim at that point. You're getting better with B and C, and D is where your optimum is, and then E is where you get fly rock. A, B, and C, you're going to have big slabs up top. It's not going to be your most efficient fragment blast, but you definitely want to avoid E, so pay attention. We show the bad shots, but let's show some good confinement. Oops, let me go back. That's kind of a cool shot, and it definitely was well contained, did exactly what they probably wanted it to do. Other fly rock causes, holes are drilled too close, so pay attention to when you design and lay holes out, pay attention to where they're at and make sure they're in the proper space and burdens, and that one hole's not going to influence the other. Examine your geology. That kind of goes back to those soft zones too. You can see those, any fractures, things like that might cause some type of problem when you go to shoot it. Make sure you know your geology. And here's your best tool right here. You have there's different ways to profile nowadays. A lot of people are doing it with drone. This is an older picture with an older face profiler, but the best thing to do is go out and scan it, get a good idea what that high wall looks like, and lay out your holes from that scan. And then also, if you're going to, if your pattern sits for a long time, might behoove you to go scan it again to make sure something hasn't changed that will cause, fly rock and things like that. And you can make adjustments at that point. But scanning doesn't take a whole lot of time, and processing does sometimes, but it is your best friend, and they do make little handheld 2D scanners now that you can get almost instant results in troubled areas. So if you have the scanner available to you, please use it. Drill this plan. So when your engineering puts together a plan, they usually have a lot of information behind that plan, such as the face profile, things like that, and then use drill logs just to kind of show what you did out there. So if something does go wrong, we can always go back to the drill logs, determine, maybe we overloaded, I don't know, just whatever there might be a problem. Drill logs help a bunch there. Check pattern dimensions. We already kind of went over that. Make sure that your pattern is what you want it to be. And a huge one is monitor borehole rise. Bobby's going to go over the calculations later, and you can understand your drilling diameter, density of your product. You can figure out your borehole rise, but you have to have a tape measure in the borehole to determine that you didn't bridge or anything like that, because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble if you're not measuring each hole. Make sure you know exactly how deep that hole is, and you don't go past where you want your desired stem. So make sure you always have a tape in the hole. And just remember, you can do everything perfectly and fly rock still may occur. So make sure you use your best practices, but always plan for the unexpected. And one thing too, for people that are out loading patterns and they're involved in that day to day, if you do overload a hole or something like that, don't be embarrassed by it. Let the blaster in charge or your customer know. Say, hey, this hole is overloaded. It's so much better to tell on yourself and say we could have a potential problem than to hide it, hit the trigger, and then someone gets hurt or worse, killed, or some property gets hurt. So please, anytime that you overload a hole, let someone know so you can plan around it. You can always do something, either suction powder out or take that hole out or retime it, or there's a lot of different things you can do. So now we'll go into blast area security. Use and communicate the blast security plan. And the best thing that I see out here is when before a blast, especially a big one, everyone gets together on pattern and they communicate what's going to be done, and your blockers are there. You can say, okay, this person's blocking here, this person's going to be here. It's really nice to have a map and showing your areas that you need to get beyond for safety. Who's going to clear out where, what, and why, and you're always in communication with each other. That really works well. Control accesses, of course, and then also radio communication. So on the radio communication, when you get into the 1 minute, they want radio silence and out here. And at that time, that's for people that, you know, so your blockers can get on, or someone that sees a problem, they can get on the radio immediately and say, hey, let's don't fire that shot. Someone broke this block or whatever. We've actually had people block out here, and a truck has run through the block and nothing was said, and the shot was set off. No one got hurt, thank goodness. But the person blocking was questioning. He said, well, it was radio silence. Well, that radio silence was there for you so you could communicate. So anytime there's an emergency, so that's what radio silence is for. And then also control your accesses and make sure you know where everyone is. Maintain visibility to the blast area. So when you're shooting, it's always a good idea to see what you're shooting and make sure that no one's coming in on the pattern, things like that. Remove all personnel to a safe distance and clear the area. And this is a good time to, you know, make sure that you're taking them to an area that's determined safe. And like this says, double that distance if you need to, but discuss what potential could happen, such as, is there an overloaded hole? What's good about the pattern? What's bad about the pattern? And how is this going to shoot, or how do you predict it to shoot? And then you can make your determinations on where to put personnel. A lot of mines have equipment, for instance, 500 feet or further, and then personnel 1,300 feet. Well, that's just a rule of thumb. If you need to go beyond that, definitely do, and make sure you know exactly how that's loaded, if there's any problems with it, and then make your determinations on safe distance at that time. Never place personnel in front of a free face. That's an obvious one, but unfortunately it's happened. So make sure that everyone's out from a free face, because that's where you're more apt to get your fly rock. And here, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a loader right below this shot. I don't know if they forgot about it, or if I don't know, crazy, or they didn't think the shot was gonna come out that far, but the loader's gone now. And then here is a construction site. So this is kind of spooky. It's an older film, but it brings the public into play. Most of the time when we're blasting, it's mine personnel and things like that. But so you can tell they're doing roadside construction to have the traffic stop, but it should have stopped them a few miles back, because that was spooky. No one was hurt there, but that was close. So that's that slide, and I'll take questions on that one. After this one, I'll scoot through this quick. I think I'm doing good on time. So here's some safe practices for explosives and blasting. I'm going to go over some always and nevers. Never use explosives unless you're familiar. That's an obvious one. So if you're introduced to something that you don't know how to use, stop, ask questions, don't proceed. Never put explosive materials in your pockets. Closing, yeah, it's not a good idea to put a detonator in your pant pocket, something like that. So that's an obvious one. Always store explosives in their original packaging and then close partially used packages. Never mix different explosives in the same package. Yeah, so don't put different size boosters in one package, things like that. So when you grab that package, you know exactly what's in that package, and there's not an assortment of things in there. Never use explosive materials that have been water soaked. Never investigate the contents of a detonator. It's not a good idea to crack open a detonator just to see, taking an electronic to see the circuit board or anything like that. Never take apart or alter the contents of any explosive material. Never alter the composition of explosive materials. Never pull wires, safety fuses, shock tube, plastic tubing, or detonating cord out of any detonator or delay device. Never expose explosive materials to sources of heat exceeding 150 degrees or an open flame. Never strike explosive materials with or allow them to be hit by objects other than those required for loading. Never subject explosive material to excessive impact or friction. Never force explosives into a borehole. And never prepare more primers than immediately needed. Out here, we put our primer assemblies together when we deploy them, so it's a good idea not to do that till you need them. Always insert the detonator completely into the cap, well, the manufactured primer. Otherwise, you may not get the desired result. Never use a cast primer or booster if the hole for the detonator is too small. And you'll run into this every once in a while. If the booster is, the through well is too small, you know, sometimes in the manufacturing, it didn't get time to set up or whatever, you'll run into that. Don't sit there and try to jam that detonator in there. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll throw that booster down the hole, of course, note it. But if you see that problem persisting throughout the day, or, you know, it's pretty common, at that time you might want to start looking at your the information on the case of those boosters. Get your, I don't know, different manufacturers do different things, date codes, lot numbers, whatever. Get all the information you can off that. Let the manufacturer know, because they might have had an issue, and you're going to give heads up to other people out there, and they might want to recall some things, and they can, you might be the first one to find it, but you might be helping a lot of people out. Never enlarge a hole in a cast primer to accept a detonator. So in this case, don't take us like a screwdriver and try to widen that through well. Never force a detonator into explosives. Now we'll get into transferring explosives. Always keep lighters, matches, and open flames at least 50 foot from vehicles carrying explosives. Always follow all laws concerning transportation of explosive materials. And a lot of things, like on the mine site, when you go to a magazine and get your accessories, from that point, when you get accessories, go straight to the blast pattern. Don't go up to administration and park your vehicle and go talk to engineering or anything like that. Make sure you go right from the magazine as quick as you, well, not as quick, but in a straight line basically to your pattern. And that way you don't and don't like go to a porta potty, things like that. Make sure you go straight to your pattern. Never leave a vehicle containing explosive materials unattended. You always need to be around that vehicle. Make sure you know where it's at. Make sure it's secured so no one can get to it or it doesn't get away from you. Always separate magazines from other magazines. Inhabited buildings and public roads and railways, according to the American Table of Distance. Never allow combustible materials to accumulate within 25 feet of the magazine. And, you know, obviously your trash, things like that blow into the magazine area, pick that up, keep it clean. But also this time of year when weeds are starting to grow, things like that, you know, make sure you're spraying your weeds, keeping your weeds down. You'll get tumbleweeds, things like that. Just always make sure that's clean. Never allow lighters, matches, or open flames within 50 foot of the magazine. Always keep the inside of the magazines clean, dry, cool, and well ventilated. Yeah, so take your time, you know, sweep those out on a routine basis, make sure they're clean and orderly. Always post clearly visible explosives keep off signs outside magazines, locate the signs so that a bullet passing through a face of the sign cannot strike the magazine. I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but in Wyoming, for some reason, people like to shoot signs, so you don't want to, people who like to shoot them, you don't want them to shoot through that and get into your magazine. Always store only explosives in the magazine. You don't want to have your explosives in there and then keep your tools and all sorts of other things in there. That's a no-no. Always rotate stocks of explosives so that the oldest materials are used first. So if you're one of those lucky ones that get to go to the magazines when your accessories arrive, make sure that you bring the old stuff up first, look at date codes, things like that, and then make sure the oldest are put towards the back, or the oldest are towards the front, newer stuff towards the back, so it's used so the oldest are used first. Never store detonators with other explosive material. Never use explosives that seem deteriorated. Consult the manufacturer. So if there's something wrong with an explosive, or you don't, it looks wrong, or if you don't think it's right, don't use it. Make notes of it and talk to your manufacturer. Never make any repairs to a magazine containing explosives. So if you need to get into a magazine to make a repair, you're going to have to take whatever's in there, put in another magazine, then you can make your repairs. It's a repair that doesn't need to be done right away. You might want to time it to where you've used most of the stuff in there before the next delivery, and go from there. Always get authorization from the blasters before entering the blast area. And that's a big one. Out here we have berms around our shots, like everyone I'm sure does, and then all the entryways into that shot has a sign and telling people who to contact before they can to get permission to come in there. And when we leave that area, there's not a blaster in charge, or we're not working that area, then those entryways need to be blocked off. Never drive over loaded holes. That's a big no-no. And one thing there, when you have two drills working, you have multiple bulk trucks, a couple blasters in charge, kind of coordinate right at the beginning of the day with the drillers and everything on how the flow of work's going to go, so you can load holes in a manner where you'll avoid driving over them, and you don't have to go through a row of loaded holes to load a stray hole or something. Just good tailgate meeting beforehand will avoid getting into a situation where you will drive over a loaded hole. Never drill into explosive materials or into a blast hole that has explosive materials in it. And that's when you're doing vertical holes, that's probably not a huge issue, but out here we do a lot of angle drilling, and the angles do change. So you might have a cast pattern where you start off with 20 degree and you'll go to 25 and 30 degree holes. You need to make sure you know where the toe of that hole is going to be. And usually engineering takes care of that, but just make sure that ask questions and make sure you don't drill into a loaded borehole. Never load a borehole containing hot or burning materials. Always clear the immediate area of persons, vehicles, and equipment before shooting. Post guards to prevent access to the blast area. So that's common sense. And sound adequate warnings prior to the blast. So when you go on a mine site, make sure you know what their warning signals are. Every mine seems to have a different way to communicate the 1 minute and all clear and things like that. Make sure you understand what those sirens mean, and then make sure when you're posting guards, things like that, you know where everyone's going, who's clearing what, and everything. Every access is covered. And even if you're not the blaster in charge, you're going over this and you've seen a road or some way to get into a blast that no one else has noticed, speak up. Make sure that everything's covered before you send everyone off to guard. Never fire a blast without a positive signal from the person in charge. Always fire the shot from a position outside of the blast area and away from where fly rock could occur. So the blaster in charge, or the person detonating the shot, you got everybody clear. Make sure you yourself are in an area where it's safe to shoot it. Never fire a shot from in front of the blast. That's where you're more than likely to get fly rock. Never enter the blast area post blast until fumes, dust, and mist have subsided. So when you hit a shot and you're waiting to clear it so everyone get back to working, don't take a shortcut and go through a cloud, an orange cloud or whatever, and put yourself in jeopardy. Make sure all those fumes are away and you know it's safe to go in there. It might take 10 minutes, but so what? That everyone can wait. Always discontinue operations during the approach and progress of electrical storms, and we already talked about that. So just make sure that you're ahead of the storm and don't get caught in the storm, because once that storm hits, you still have things to do. You have to get your personnel to safety. You have to get your accessories where they need to be, figure out what you're going to do with the bulk truck, leave it on pattern, whatever. All those decisions should be made beforehand. And if you're paying attention to the storm, that'll give you added time, and you shouldn't get yourself in a bind. Never take part or alter the contents of explosive material. You kind of already went over that. Never fight fires involving explosive materials. Remove yourself and all of the persons to a safe location and guard the area. So if you come across a brush fire that's heading towards your magazines, there's not much you're going to be able to do about that. Make sure it's communicated what's going on and do whatever you can to get people away from that. Like on a bulk truck, if we have an engine fire or a fire in the brake, and our drivers deem that they can fight, deploy the fire extinguisher safely, that's acceptable. But if that at any time, if you've extinguished both extinguishers and that fire's still going, just get out of there. There's nothing you can do. And if you at any time you feel you can't do it safely, get out of there. Don't worry about even trying. So here's an instance where the pattern changed and we had surface delays and we ran over it. Luckily nothing happened, but not our best practices for this contractor. And then this one here was kind of unique in the fact that a detonator and the booster were sent on accident because the loader got into a loaded shot. It went past the shot material, got into a loaded shot, and basically sent a booster and a primer to a customer. They had to reject the train, they had to go through it, and they found the booster and the primer. But a good lesson there is to make sure when you leave a pattern and they're digging that night or whenever, put up some flagging stuff to distinguish where the digging quits and where your pattern starts, to give the shovel operator, because they can't really see up 50, 60 foot. They don't know what's going on up there, and sometimes they get into holes that are loaded. And if you just communicate with them and put up flagging, put up lath, anything like that, so they can distinguish where to stop, that's your best case there. So with that, I think I took my 55 minutes as allotted, and I can answer questions.
Thank you, Tony. Hey, we do have a couple questions as well from our presenters. One from Ken Erschlager. Ken, I'm going to unmute your microphone. Actually, you're going to have to unmute yours. Are you able to? There we go.
Yep. Okay, I'm here. All right, Tony, thanks for that presentation. I wanted to sort of build a little bit on that one fly rock video that you had adjacent to a 4-lane highway. Okay. And that happened just north of Pittsburgh here a number of years back, where, they obviously had a huge face movement there. It blocked that 4-lane road for 6 hours almost. Below that was another 4-lane road that one had replaced and closed it for 4 hours. Below that was a set of railroad tracks that they had to clean up. And some of the rocks went halfway across the Allegheny River.
Holy smokes.
Okay. Huge oopa. Okay. Not only from that standpoint, but that was a contract that the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation had cut to stabilize that wall. And part of the contract called for profiling the face or tracking the holes before they shot. So they laser profiled the front face. A person was up on the hill, bore tracking the holes, and as they were bore tracking the holes, they were loading the holes right behind that person. The person asked them, well, don't you want to wait until I break down the information so you can be sure you're loading? And the contractor said, well, it just says we have to do these. The contract doesn't say we have to review the data. I'm like, really? Okay. So, if you do take the time to laser profile or track, use the information, all right, it would have completely solved this problem and would have saved the blaster a 6-month suspension.
Wow, that's amazing that they wouldn't use that information. Why go through the process? But that's a really good point.
So yeah, I wanted to build on that just because you had the video, and it goes right to your point of doing that stuff, but take the time to use it right.
Exactly. And yeah, and a good thing too is, out here we have shots that sleep a little bit too. Remember too that the face profile that we did today may not be what you're shooting towards 2 weeks from now. So always be up on that. And as a blaster in charge, it's good for you to go look at that face and make sure that there isn't sloughing, and make sure that you identify anything that, and if it needs to be reprofiled, so be it. It doesn't take that long. It's a lot better to spend 2 hours reprofiling it than to go through what might happen.
Great. Hey, we also had a question from another one of our presenters, Brad Brown from Dyno Nobel. Brad, I've got you unmuted.
Thanks, Keith. Tony, some nice stuff there. Thank you for it. One of the things I look at is the communications, and you hit on it in several places there. Getting the right information and using it, as Ken is just saying. The idea of getting the drill logs and having that information, speaking up if you overload or bridge a hole if something's going on, if you lose a depth, if you don't hook something up, if you're not sure how to do it. I've had guys trouble with that. And all the way through to clearing and so on. You really don't use the word blame until something's gone wrong. If you can collaborate, if you can get the information from the drillers and make use of it and save a problem, that's a good thing. If you can save a problem before you overload a hole or touch off an overloaded hole, and on and on and on. That communication lets you avoid the blame. It lets you fix something before it's a problem. But accidents cause paperwork, my sister always used to say, and anything you can do to communicate to make it work better before something goes sideways, the better off you are. Thanks.
No, I appreciate that, Brad. And like Brad was saying, there's not a powder company out there, Dyno Nobel, Nelson Brothers, Buckley, I go through all of them, that if you go, they're not going to discipline you if you report something like that. If you say, man, I made a mistake, I overloaded, you're not going to get disciplined for that. I guarantee you that. I mean, if you do it over and over again, they're going to have to retrain you and things like that. But if it's a instance where something just happened and you come out and you tell on yourself, basically, I know it sucks sometimes to say, hey, I made a mistake, but boy, telling on yourself might save a life, might save some equipment. So please do it. And I guarantee you, you won't get in trouble.
Great. Now, are there any of the attendees that would like to ask any questions or have any comments? You can raise your hand now, or you can type in the questions panel, and we'll definitely respond.
It looked like there was a question on the first presentation from Greg Dorner.
Yeah, Greg had mentioned that there was no sound on that video. And
yeah, someone texted me. One of my people that works for Nelson Brothers said, "Hey, you're doing good so far, but there's no sound on that." And hopefully people got the general gist that electricity does go through the ground. There's keep your feet together. If you get caught outside an electrical storm, that crouching, keep your heels on the ground, things like that. I know it was kind of a weird video, but it kind of went to the point. So I'm sorry about that. It's kind of a funny video. I wish there was sound on it because the actor in it has some good jokes, but there wasn't a whole bunch to it. So, but I'm sorry about that.
We can send that out to everyone if you'd like, okay. Tony.
Okay, yeah, and it's like I said, I don't think it's a huge issue, but if people would like to see it or use it, I just got off. I can't remember where I got it, but I can definitely get that out.
Sounds good. Doesn't look like we've received any questions. Rio, did you want to take a 10-minute break still?
Yes, let's take a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 37 minutes past the hour.
Okay, sounds
Mountain
good.
time at 9:37.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break and we'll be right back. Okay, hopefully everyone was able to get some coffee or take a quick break. We're going to go ahead and get started back up. Our next presenter is Ken Erschlager, and hopefully, Ken, I got that correct. And he's with the Office of Surface Mining, and he'll be doing the presentation on public relations at the doorstep. And let's hopefully, Ken, we can get this system working perfectly for you. You should have the mouse control now.
Okay, good. We'll see how that goes, and then you'll just take it back as you need it to run a video or two, right?
So, yep, sounds good.
Okay, good. Well, good morning. My name's Ken Erschlager. I work for the Office of Surface Mining in Pittsburgh, and want to discuss some of the public relations aspects of our business lines. This presentation actually was put together in the mid-2000s with the Public Education and Public Relations Committee for the ISEE. We did a series of workshops, and there's actually a CD out on this particular presentation as well. So some of you may have seen that, but it covers the basics of what you need to think about as a blaster as you engage the public. And while this presentation is by and large going to focus on public relations at people's doorstep, at their house, in their yard, this equally applies to PR at the grocery store, PR at the bus stop, PR at a public meeting. Okay, so hone these skills a little bit, because the better off you're able to engage the public and leave a favorable impression on the public at large, you're going to be helping your industry be perceived better by the public as well. So with that, okay, there we go. All right, so what we're going to do here is we compiled a number of scenarios from across the country. Some are mining related, some were observed in quarrying, some on construction sites, but they illustrate some pretty good principles. And it's meant to get you thinking about how you respond to some of the inquiries that you may have. So the scenarios are going to be primarily in people's yards. It's going to be between the blaster and a homeowner. And some of them will occur before the blast, some after the blast, some during the event as well. And the goal is to simply make you self-aware of how you present yourself and the information you deliver are both important. By and large, in a communication scheme, like 70% of your message is delivered in body language. And you've got to be aware of that when delivering your message as well. So hopefully come completion of this, you'll have a little better idea. All right. So right way to begin with, okay, approaching somebody on their doorstep, you need to be friendly. You need to have a clear vision of why you are there and be able to explain that to the homeowner. You need to know a little bit about the blasting, what the project is it construction, is it mining, is it quarrying, and have some idea of what your company policy is so that you're in a position to answer any questions that they may ask, okay? And take ownership in you being there as a professional. Name, contact information, preferably in a sense of a business card or a leaflet. You're there to represent the industry, and you want to try to build trust with these people so that you minimize the amount of complaints and whatnot that you're going to get from them. build trust, and they'll respect what you're doing, right? So with that, Keith, you can run the first video for the way to do this properly. A good example.
Hi. Good morning, Mrs. Bradley. My name is Bill Schuss. I'm involved with Songbird Construction. We're going to be doing some blasting across the street, and I was hoping to monitor that blasting with a seismograph in your front yard. Would that be all right?
Okay, why does it have to be set up in my yard?
Well, you're the closest home to the blast, and that would give us the best information about what the blasting is doing to nearby homes.
Okay. And where would you set it up?
In your yard, somewhere facing the blast, between your home and the blast. It's a small item we just spike into the ground.
Okay. And how long would this take?
The blasting monitoring would take 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay. Sounds real good.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
If you'd like to review the results of the blast, I'd be glad to show you the tape.
Okay, that would be real good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, looking in that delivery style, the person was calm, had good eye contact, provided a soothing tone to the overall event, asked permission, okay, and was able to clearly answer any of the questions that the homeowner had at that point in time, right? So keep that in mind. And then on the other hand, there's the wrong way to do this. I'm trying to advance this, Keith, and I'm going nowhere.
All right, hold on one sec. There you go.
There we go. Okay. All right. So, the last thing you want to do is show up looking like the village bum, disrespecting people's property, poor posture, poor attire. Make yourself, look presentable. Let people know that you're in their yard, and give the people respect that they do, because you are actually intruding on their property, okay, and interrupting their lives, not only from a blast vibration standpoint, but also if you're there to set up a blasting seismograph. So Keith, you can run the next video on this one that illustrates the poor way.
Excuse me, who are you? Why are you on my property?
I come here to monitor blasting.
Of what?
They're going to be doing some blasting over there. My boss asked me to come over and set the seismograph up at your house here.
I guess it's okay this time, but next time I'd like to be asked.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there you go. How'd this person do? Think about it. Disheveled, indirect, disrespectful, the property, spitting on people's sidewalks. I'm surprised the dog didn't bite him. And the same's true when you're coming in with company trucks and whatnot. Make sure the tires are clean before you pull into somebody's driveway. Try to refrain from smoking and throwing cigarette butts in the front bushes. These are all things that chip away at the public's confidence about the level of rigor and detail that you're paying attention to things in your day-to-day job. Okay. All right. So obviously, there's right and wrong ways to do this. So we're going to explore some of those. But the one thing you have to also be prepared to do is answer the question for which you don't know the answer. And the way we recommend you doing that is to having a home base to go back to. Instead of simply standing there looking dumbfounded with no idea how to respond, your basic response to any questions you don't know the answer for is, look, okay, I don't know the answer to that right now, but we're professionals interested in conducting good blasting practices that don't impact you or your house, and we want to do it right. I'll get the answer for you, and I'll get back to you in a short period of time. Okay. But the key that you won't leave with them is that you're interested in their safety and the protection of their property as well. All right. And that will help you get through those rough patches in these person-to-person contacts. Okay. All right. So scenario number one, say that you have a set of, you're at a construction site in this particular instance. The contract was bid with no blasting, but all at once somebody said, we got to do something. The rock's just too hard for this rock hammer that we've got. So, let's put up a couple shots and get us through this rough patch. So this is a video, an example of somebody coming up and reintroducing himself first time for an event that wasn't scheduled. So go ahead and run that if you would, Keith.
Good morning, Mrs. Bradley.
Good morning.
I'm with Songbird Construction. We'd like to do some blasting in the area nearest your home. The project was started several weeks ago, but the blasting looks like it's going to be required in front of your home. They've hit very hard rock.
Okay, I thought there wasn't going to be any blasting. Is there any other way of doing it?
To economically and feasibly remove it in a quick manner, that's the best way that we know how.
Okay, because a friend of mine had blasting near her house and she had some damage.
Well, we're going to monitor the blasting with seismographs in front of your house to make sure that no damage does occur.
Okay, when's the blasting going to take place?
2 to 3 days, it looks like they're going to need to start blasting.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
So there you have it. And again, calm demeanor, someone being able to answer the questions in such a way that the homeowner has confidence in what they're doing at this stage of the game. Okay. There we go, finally. Okay. So some of the hints of how that video was favorable. Scenario 2, okay. I requested a pre-blast survey and did not receive one. This is a requirement for all coal mining operations, normally part of contracts for construction jobs and sometimes requirements for quarries as well. So think about this a second. What do you tell the homeowner in this instance? Is it something like, you need to contact such and such for that request? Yeah, good answer. Know exactly who that person is, and have that information readily available. Is I suspect vibrations will be low today, but we'll get you one as soon as possible. That's a fair answer as well, depending on the circumstances, especially if you're in the middle of a project and for whatever reason the person missed the opportunity to respond up front to an offering or pre-blast survey. All right. Thirdly, I call for someone immediately. Again, a good answer. Too bad you missed the boat. Not a good answer. Try to avoid that sarcasm or be flippant about responding to their request, because people can get very testy and this is your opportunity to set the tone for the remainder of the project, conceivably. Okay, the better relationships you keep start to finish, the better off you're going to be. Different scenario. Homeowner also have a special needs person inside that startles easily. What can you do to help? Okay, so again, think about this for a second. And what does this get you? All right, well, we're going to give some type of signal. Let me know if that's enough to forewarn you, because some, special needs kids startle easily and get upset and become irrational. Well, you've still got to deal with these as well. Even though it's not a regulatory requirement that you do that, it's certainly still in your best interest. Sometimes you can call in advance. Is there a good time that works for you? So we can avoid the time that, say, somebody's sleeping on the midnight, there's working a midnight shift or something. Although it's not a special needs case, still viable. Okay, or we could send somebody daily to notify you. Okay, or call. All right, all reasonable ways to respond. All right. Okay, this is a monitoring of a construction blast. I don't have the video for this, but what this did do was it was a video of a person coming up, knocking on the door, being very calm, pleasant, saying, "Here's what I'm here for. I'm going to set up a seismograph." He does so. The blast goes off. A homeowner comes out and says, "You knocked a picture off the wall in my house." And by virtue of the person's response, very flippant, "We're in compliance. We couldn't have done that," type of response. It was grossly inappropriate. You've got to give due consideration to everybody's concern. Hear them out. Some of the homeowners will become very dogged about everything you do if they feel in the least sense that they've been ignored. Okay, and of course, that results in time that's lost, treasure that's lost. Okay, and your credibility is certainly lost as well. Okay, and these would have been a couple different responses to handle that. Sorry, you're going to feel the blasting. Hopefully, we're going to blast such that you don't cause damage. And the bottom line is, if you do it right, you can handle things such that you can avoid damage claims, which often either involves insurance companies or regulatory folks. All right. How about this? I have an expensive glass collection inside. If some fall off the shelves and break, will you be responsible? Again, what's your response to this? Yeah, we would. Thanks for making us aware. I'll alert the blaster of your concern. Okay. Doesn't matter how things are precariously situated in somebody's house or how pictures hung on the wall. If you shake the house and at the time of that event it falls, you're legally responsible for it. Okay, so try to address these issues up front. We're running a blast today. Could you take them down for a short period of time for a few hours? All right, and that might be palatable to some homeowners and it might not. Okay. We have insurance to cover the cost. Not a good response, because at that point in time, you're saying, well, it's okay if we break something, but we'll just pay for it. Not a good way to go. You want to avoid any types of damages that do occur. All right. We're allowed to shake your house, so you better glue them down. Nah, stay away from those wise comments that don't do you or anybody else good. All right, next one. I've been raising dogs for 20 years. Since you started blasting, my dogs will not mate anymore. What are you going to do about it? Okay, so I hear a bunch of you chuckling out there already. You can't do that. You gotta be sincere with addressing these types of issues. All right. As soon as you laugh at somebody, that means, or the situation, they're taking that as you're not really serious about helping me here or hearing me in any meaningful fashion. So try to stifle those types of situations as best you can. Okay. Good response. Oh, my apologies. I'm not familiar with that subject. May I get back to you? Gee, never heard that one before. Not so good. Sorry, but we're within the regulatory limits is not a good one. Lady, you're barking up the wrong tree is really bad. Okay. So as easy it is to come up with these other flippant comments, no matter what the situation is, you just got to stifle them. All right. Warning signals. This is another set of videos I don't have available, but it's a set of videos that illustrates a person in the backyard conducting a damage survey with a homeowner. The blast goes off. No warning signals heard. And this is actually my personal experience where me, 2 state inspectors and a homeowner in the backyard, they pulled the trigger of a really large shot at 600 feet. And all 4 of us simultaneously levitated off the ground. Just that startling and that close. So, you know, it illustrates that immediately thereafter, the person doing the survey says, look, that's not supposed to happen. I'm going to go talk to them right now. We're going to get this changed. So the point is, whoever you send to someone's property needs to know enough about what the protocols are, what should happen, or what doesn't happen, so that they can take a proactive action on the event at that point in time. Again, to directly and immediately address the citizen's concern. Okay. And here again, these are some of the good responses and some of the poor responses that you could give in these instances. Later that same day, same house. Okay, they had a second shot going off. Standing in the front yard with the homeowner and the mine manager came out because he wanted to see if he could hear the siren, which we could that day. But right as they're prepping for the shot, kids get off the school bus and take off in the yard and run up and are starting to play in the tree line within 350, 400 feet of the blast. And they sounded the siren, and the mine manager said nothing to say, kids, come on back here. Try to be proactive again in protecting the public, because a lot of times that siren is an indicator to the kids anyways. Oh, there's a shot ready to go off. Let's go take a look. So make sure you make the homeowners aware that, when you hear this siren and your kids are out there, have them move in the other direction, come in the house, just so you can account for them. All right. Make those types of statements to the public to illustrate to them that you're not only concerned with their safety, but with the safety of theirs as well. All right. This is the response that the mine manager gave, that they're off the permit area. We ain't concerned with them. It's better safe be sorry. Like Tony said, double the blast area distance. It's always a wise choice. All right, this is a resident's perspective of blasting. Okay, Tony, is this one we have, right?
I believe so. Let's see.
I'm pretty sure.
Is this the one?
Okay, you know what? I'm getting short on time. I'm just going to bounce through this. Okay, what this one is, the resident comes outside while the guy's monitoring the blast and goes, that was horrible. And it illustrates the difference of feeling the blast outside the house where her husband was, and inside the house. You're always going to feel it more inside the residential structure. Okay, and you've got to be able to address that appropriately. All right, I'm trying to bounce through this one, Tony. I'm not going here.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So there again, the key is never downplay a person's personal perception. Always hear them out, even though you know that it should be okay. All right. You know, another scenario, excuse me, are you here taking these readings in my yard? May I have a copy of the seismogram? Well, of course they're entitled to the seismogram. I'll give you one immediately, you know, especially if you've got a seismograph with a printer on board. Okay, if you don't have a printer on board, I might have to go back and make a copy. I like the fact that you can hand them one right then and there because it shows that you're not hiding anything. Okay, I'm not authorized to give you a copy. There again, what are you trying to hide? Try to be open with it. Okay, or if you gotta jump through a bunch of hoops for the homeowner to get something because you're on their property, they shouldn't have to jump through those hoops, in my mind. Pretty soon they're gonna tell you you're not welcome here. Or just flat out, no, you can't have it is a bad response too. All right. All right, so, you know, I'm right at my time limit here. So I have a couple more, the seismograph locations. You know, if you're asked if it's outside, why are you putting it outside the house? It's my house that's shaking, that's important. Now, the rules pertain to blasting vibrations entering the house, okay? And if they really insist on having you put a seismograph in their house, based on the training that you guys and gals have as blasters, you're not able to do this. So don't go there. Just say, I'll get the right person to do it, if anything. All right. Take care of the equipment, manage it so that you don't damage the equipment. You got sensitive electronic stuff. In this instance, a guy booted the sensor out of the ground with their steel-toed shoes, and the homeowner says, geez, isn't that going to affect the readings? And probably not, but you need to illustrate techniques in setting up seismographs as outlined by the ISEE that leave favorable impressions with the homeowners. Okay, so I'm just going to bounce a couple of damage allegations, just hear them out. Make sure that you just don't blow them off. If you do, there was an instance in Indiana where they laughed at a lady who lodged a complaint at 5 miles away, and 4 or 5 years later, after this lady dogged them to the ends of the earth, they actually ended up settling with the person. Try to nip these things in the bud as best as you can. Okay. Really strange ones where somebody said, hey, you cracked my footer, you know, and I said, well, really, how do you know? You can't see your footer. And the person responds, well, neither can you. You know, and you just got to, again, maintain your composure and try to handle it as professionally as you can. This odd instance is one I'm just going to bounce through. Did that really just crash, Keith?
No, we're good.
Okay, good. Okay. This is an instance where every time the siren went off, the dog went through the screen door, broke the screen door, you know, and, you know, the guy says, lady, if you can't control your dog, it's not my problem. Don't say that stuff to people because it does you no favors in the long run. Not only is your phone going to ring more often, but they're going to be more likely to file a damage claim even if they haven't had one. So exercise care. All right. So in conclusion, you know, remember your audience, remember who you're talking to, whether it be on their doorstep, at the grocery store, public meet or whatever. Be able to answer their questions, know enough about your business line that you can explain things in simple terms while avoiding the technical jargon and whatnot. Know your company's policies and procedures, what you can do and cannot do. And above all, what's your demeanor? Be polite, sincere, and objective. Keep the snide remarks to yourself, and don't let the public see that side of your personality. So remember, if you do say stuff that's out of line, it's going to cost you in time, as your phone rings all the time, in terms of money, treasure, hiring consultants to come in and help you with the problem you created. All right. Remember home base. We're here, as blasting professionals interested in sound blasting practices that minimize impacts to you and your house. We're here to protect you, and we're here to protect your property. So with that, hope you have a better idea of how to conduct public relations, your blasting operations, that you're responsible for. And if we have time, we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Ken. Again, if you'd like to ask a question or have a comment, you can raise your hand. If you'd rather just write a question in the question area, we can do that as well and respond.
All right, well, thank you, Ken. With that, let's take about a 5 or 6 minute break. Let's come back 15 minutes past the hour, please.
All right, let's go ahead and get started again. Our next presentation will be from Bobby Ingram. He's from Nelson Brothers Mining Services as well. He's going to do a presentation on calculation for PF borehole rise. Bobby, do we got you?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and hand you the controls here.
Is that good to go?
It is good to go.
Okay, perfect. Well, as the other presenters have mentioned, I want to thank everyone for attending this first webinar for some continuing education hours. I need a few myself because I did a poor job of documenting some other classes that I've instructed. So I appreciate Rio and Keith getting this all put together here. So just a little quick history about me. I've been in D&B since 1978. I think I got my first Alabama Blasters license in, it might have been 79 or 80, I can't remember. And then I later got my Wyoming license, well, I think it was probably about 1984 maybe. My number is 201, that tells you how old I am anyway. So I've been with Nelson Brothers about 28 years. Also, in previous years, I've worked for, back in the early 80s, I worked for IRECO. Many of you know that name. Later became Dyno Nobel. And also the Ensign Bigford Company for a couple of years or so in the Texas and Arkansas, Oklahoma market. A lot of good people in this drilling and blasting fraternity I've met over the years, and I hope that some of you that are younger will be able to meet a lot of these guys during your career as well. So one thing I did want to mention here, I'm going to put a little plug in. Nelson Brothers, a little over a year ago, developed an app that you can download to your mobile device that has will have all these calculations that we're going to review today. And it also helps you with really with your shot reports. If you want to use that, it's just you can just search for Nelson Brothers, and the icon will be a kind of a gray rounded edge square with a red N in the middle of it. And so they really did a good job on this. I highly encourage those of you that do calculations on a regular basis or a daily basis to take a look at that. So anyway, with that being said, I know the title did not cover everything that we're going to cover today. So you can see here a list of the calculations that we plan to cover. And well, why do I need to know these calculations? A lot of this stuff is figured out for me. That you say, well, there's a lot of cases where it helps you as a blaster to know, okay, if this hole says it requires this many pounds, how many feet of blasting agent is that, or how much stemming is that going to leave me? So how do I know if I'm getting the right number of pounds in this hole? So we're gonna review this. A lot of you probably use these regularly, and those of you that don't, it's a very good educational tool to have. So with that being said, we'll move forward here. So the first calculation that we're going to cover here is just to calculate the volume of material to be blasted. Volume is three-dimensional. It's length, width, and height. So the volume in 1 cubic foot is 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. That is 1 cubic foot. However, in blasting, most of us at least, work in terms of cubic yards. Some of us in quarries express our powder factors in in pounds per ton, so we have to convert yards to tons. But for the purposes today, we're just going to be using cubic yards. So therefore, a cubic yard, there's 3 feet in 1 yard, right? So it would be 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. So there's 27 cubic feet in 1 cubic yard. Essentially, this is what we just talked about. So to convert your cubic feet into cubic yards, you take those cubic feet and just divide it by 27. Make sure I didn't miss something there. Okay. So this, we'll just take a little, if you have, I guess maybe we should have mentioned that if you want to, hopefully you have a calculator with you, knowing the agenda, so we can work some through these problems together. So we'll just work through this one together here. So we have a blast hole that's 60 feet deep. We have a burden of 34 feet and 37 feet of spacing. So the question is, how many cubic yards is this one particular blast hole responsible for? So if you have your calculator, I'm going to work through it myself. We'll calculate this together. Okay. So as our previous calculation we just discussed would be 60 times 34 times 37. There's your length, width, and height. You divide that by 27. And I'll round a lot of things off, so that's why it was 2795 and a half, so it's 2,796 cubic yards for that one hole. Again, I'll go through these various calculations one by one. At the end of each, I'll just pause and I'll ask Keith to field any questions, if anyone has any, and if not, then we'll just move on.
Does look like we have one question.
Okay.
From Michael Brantley, can we get Mr. Ingram to tell again how to find the application from the Nelson Brothers webpage?
Well, there's I have an Apple phone, so you just go to your app store. If you have another phone, then an Android type phone, then I forgot what that search engine is called to look up apps on there. I used to know that, but I don't anymore. If someone else could help me with that, that'd be fine. Keith, maybe if you know, I just can't remember, but you just search on whatever app search engine is associated with your phone, and you can probably just type in Nelson Brothers, and you should be able to find it. You may have to scroll down, but you should be able to find it. If not, let me know. Maybe we can get my email to you some way, and you can email me, and I'll be certainly glad to help you out with that.
Hey, Bobby, this is Rio. Hey, on iTunes, you just search, or in the App Store, you search Nelson Brothers. You can find it. I believe it's Google Play Store for Android.
Yep, it sure is.
Okay, we also had a couple more questions from Thomas Hunter. Coal or dirt?
We're going to get to that. Later in our calculations, we will cover the difference between cubic yards of overburden and tons of coal. So we will be getting to that.
Great, great. And just a follow up from Michael. He just thought he had heard it was on the company webpage for that information, but it sounds like it's in the App Store, and I'm glad we can all find it.
Absolutely. Okay.
Doesn't look like we have any other questions. So.
Okay, great. Good questions. That maybe helps someone else out. So thanks for the questions. Okay, so our previous calculation was just for one hole. This time we're going to look at the cubic yards in an entire shot. Again, it's ever how you want to calculate this up. A lot of guys, they'll take the cubic yards of one hole and say, okay, I've got 50 holes. So you take your cubic yards of one hole multiplied by the number of holes you have, and they calculate their total cubic yards in a shot by that method. However, you can just save yourself a step or two here. So this time, let's calculate. We have a shot that's 1,500 feet in length. It is 170 feet in width. And our bench height is 150 feet. Okay. Our cubic yards in this shot, length time width time height, divided by 27 gives us a little over 1.4 million cubic yards. Okay, these first few are pretty basic. So here we go, Thomas. So we'll get into this. This will kind of address your question here. Very timely, I might add. So we have a coal shot, 500 feet in length, 70 feet in width. This must be a southern pit width, I guess, or probably just truck and shovel, I guess, out here. And the bench height is 65 feet. So first thing we're going to do here, and this is Powder River Basin coal density here. So what we're going to do here is the first thing we got to do is we're going to have to get our cubic yards, which was 84,259 cubic yards. So to convert out here, at least in Powder River Basin, yards to tons, our coal density is about 1.08 tons per yard. Okay, so we just need to multiply our cubic yards by 1.08, and that'll convert us to tons. Now this is one method that we can use. I'm going to show you another step here that takes one step out of this to help you calculate that. Okay, so essentially, if you want to take one step out of that, you divide 27, which is 1 cubic yard, by 1.08, and that gives you 25. Okay, so you can take your length of your shot times your width times your depth now for coal, and just divide that by 25. All right, and you're going to come up with the same answer here. So essentially, that's just saving you a step of converting cubic yards to tons by that multiplication factor of 1.08. Okay. Okay, Keith, that covers the calculations for volume.
Great. Are there any questions? Any comments? It doesn't appear.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to powder factors. Powder factors are typically, at least, expressed in, as I mentioned earlier, at least one of them earlier, in 4 different ways. We have, this is the one we typically use the most, pounds of explosives per bank cubic yard, pounds of explosives per ton, cubic yards per pound of explosives, or tons per pound of explosives. So again, typically for most of us that are in surface coal and quarries, we'll use the top 2 of these 4. Just depends on the operation. Some like to look at it in other ways, like the last 2 examples there. So now, why is powder factor important? Well, powder factor is essentially the amount of explosives in 1 bank cubic yard of the material that you're blasting. Okay, it's a good indicator of how much energy you're putting into 1 cubic yard of material. So again, as I mentioned, in the Powder River Basin, we usually express ours in pounds of explosives divided by the bank cubic yards. So a quick example. We have a blast hole that the cubic yards of that blast hole calculates to 3,000. And we're going to load 2,000 pounds into this 1 blast hole. So again, the calculation is total pounds in that blast hole divided by the cubic yards involved with that blast hole. So in this case, 2,000 divided by 3,000 is going to yield us a powder factor of 0.67 pounds per bank cubic yard. So if you got your calculators and your pen and paper handy, we'll go through a quick exercise here. We have a 9-inch blast hole, 32 feet of burden, 36 feet of spacing, and a bench height of 50 feet. And we put 1,150 pounds of explosives into this hole. What is our powder factor? I'll give us just about a few seconds here to calculate this up. Okay, first of all, our volume, burden times spacing times depth divided by 27, and it yielded 2,133 bank cubic yards. So we loaded 1,150 pounds of explosives into this particular hole. We divide that by the total number of cubic yards, and our powder factor for this particular hole is 0.54 pounds per bank cubic yard. What I wanted to show here, guys, is just there are blasters at certain locations that if they're told, well, we want to load this shot to a 0.54 powder factor. So some of them will essentially calculate every hole based on its depth to get the number of pounds that they want loaded in that hole. I want to show you what happens in that particular scenario. Okay, so this is the same information that we just used. So a 9-inch hole with the density of product, I think I used a 1.3 density product. to get 36 pounds a foot. So we take the total number of pounds, 1,150 pounds, and we had 36 pounds per foot with this blasting agent used. That yields us 32 feet powder column. So the whole depth was 50. So if we had 32 feet of explosives from 50 foot, that leaves us 18 feet of stemming. Well, the whole depth, let's just say, increases to 65 feet, okay? So now it's 32 by 36 times 65 divided by 27 yields us 2,773 bank cubic yards. So if we want to know how many pounds go into that hole at that powder factor, take your yards, multiply it by the powder factor you're looking for, in this case 0.54. So it says, okay, that's going to give us almost 1,500 pounds in that 65-foot hole. Okay, so 1,498 pounds divided by 36 pounds per foot for this particular blasting agent we're using yields us a 42-foot powder column. So now in a 65-foot hole, minus our 42-foot powder column, now our stemming increases to 23 feet. Well, and you ask the question, well, so what's the issue with that? Well, we typically prefer to keep a constant stem height. Therefore, you get a consistent looking shot, right? And you get consistent results as far as your top fragmentation in the stemming area. So when you begin loading each hole to a specific powder factor, then after the blast, you'll be able to tell a significant difference in the way that the surface looks, because your stemming is going to vary based on your hole depth. So again, our method is to load to a consistent stem height, and the powder factor is going to fall where it may. But overall, you design your blast based on a specific depth, or at least average depth, and your powder factor will be higher in some areas and lower in some areas. But overall, you can reach your desired powder factor, or very, very close to it, and keep a consistent stem height. Okay, let's try this one here. This blast hole has 40 foot of burden and 33 feet of spacing and a bench height of 150 feet. So I guess we're probably going to need the cubic yards of that. And our cubic yards is 7,333. So now we're going to try to find out what the powder factor for this particular hole is. And we loaded 7,000 pounds into this particular hole. Powder factor is pounds divided by cubic yards. And the answer comes out at about 0.95 pounds per bank cubic yard powder factor. Probably do one more. We have the length of this blast is 1,200 feet, 180 feet in pit width, or in blast width, and a bench height of 175 feet. We'll get our bank cubic yards at 1.4 million bank cubic yards. The total amount of explosives loaded in this particular shot was 1,300,000 pounds. Again, powder factor is pounds divided by cubic yards. Whoops. So here we have a powder factor of almost 1 pound per bank cubic yard. 0.93 pounds per bank cubic yard. More of a casting type powder factor. I'll go ahead and go through this real quick, Keith, and then we'll see if there's any questions about anything. One way that Nelson Brothers, we look at powder factors is also on a powder factor per foot basis. And the reason we do that is if you just look at just your general overall powder factor, that's taken in the stemming area of the blast hole, okay? There's no explosives in there, so it's really doing no work. What's doing the work is your powder column. So one way we take a look at powder factor is powder factor per foot. So essentially, it's just the powder factor of 1 foot of loaded borehole. That's what's doing the work for you. Again, the concept is giving a given pattern, about 32 by 36, whatever the pattern is, keeping your pattern constant. And regardless of the depth, right? We get back to that depth thing again. This is giving you a powder factor for 1 loaded foot of blast hole. And we think that's gives us a better matrix of the type of energy that we need for a particular application. So essentially, again, you take the pounds per foot divided by burden times spacing divided by 27. So see, you're taking the bench height out of the equation here. You're just taking your burden and spacing, divide that by 27, and that's just going to give you the powder factor per foot of 1 foot of loaded borehole. And I'll give you an example here. Here's a 9-inch, and we're using a 1.3 density product, okay, in a 9-inch blast hole. So 9 times 9, we'll get to this we'll get to this shortly. 9 times, you got the borehole diameter squared times your constant of 0.3405 times the density of your blasting agent. In this case, it's 36 pounds per foot. So we take our burden and space and divide that by 27, and that gives us 46.6. So now we got 36 pounds per foot divided by 46.6. And in 1 loaded foot of this blast hole, our powder factor is 0.77. So again, this is where the rubber meets the road, as we like to say, so that you're seeing the powder factor of 1 loaded foot in a blast hole rather than the overall powder factor, which takes in your stem zone. So anyway, just thought I would throw that out there as another way of looking at your powder factor and what kind of work you're getting out of it. So what we want to do here, this is just a small exercise. You don't have to go through this. I just want to demonstrate I've seen operations that as their hole depths increase, then they want to expand their pattern and try to keep their powder factor consistent that way. Shallower depths, they bring the pattern in. Deeper holes, they spread the pattern out. So here's what happens if you like to use this powder factor per foot method of designing. Then here's what can occur. I'll just put these up here. So we're still using that 36 pounds per foot, but now our factor now is 50.7. So when you divide 36 now by 50.7, now our powder factor is only a 0.71. And I'll back up here. We had a 0.77 when the pattern was 34 by 37. By expanding the pattern, now we drop that down to a 0.71. Again, just another way to look at powder factors. Keith, I'll stop there and see if there's any questions or comments.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Doesn't look like it. We're good.
All righty. Okay, so now we'll move along to calculating the borehole rise. So this gets back to a little bit, we kind of already touched on it just a little bit, but so density, what role density plays in our loading of blast holes. So density is normally expressed in terms of a specific gravity or mass divided by volume. So the density of pure water, now I'll come back to that in just a second. The density of pure water is 1 gram per cubic centimeter. So here's why it's important as far as when you talk about pure water being a 1. We all know this involved in drilling and blasting that the water in a blast hole is probably not pure. So therefore, the density of that water in a blast hole when you're loading either through water or you're dewatering that water is that, let's just pick a number here. If you're loading a product, trying to get say a 1.25 product to settle through water, but yet your water density, because of whatever distillates are in that water, sand or silica or just regular dirt, could be a 1.3. Well, guess what? If your water density is 1.3 and your explosive is only 1.25, what's heavier? The water. And your explosives, chances are, is not going to sink through that. So we have to always keep that in mind when we're trying to determine what blasting agent we're going to use. If you're using emulsion ANFO blends, what's that density? Is it dense enough to go through the water? If there's some water in the blast hole and you're not dewatering. So anyway, just wanted to touch on that. So generally speaking, out here, most of the major AN manufacturers density it's a low density AN out west, and most of us have close to the same density of raw AN. So by the time you add 6% fuel, the density of ANFO is going to be a 0.82 plus or minus. A lot of our particular sensitized emulsion, the specific gravity or density is 1.25 grams per cubic centimeter. So obviously ANFO is not water resistant. You don't want to load that into water. We know that. And even if you did, it wouldn't sink through water. Emulsion, on the other hand, is 100% water resistant and would sink through water if you decide to load that way. Again, unless your water density is higher than a 1.25. Just wanted to show a little bit of, speaking of densities here, just want to show a little bit of our particular blend density chart of our various blends. You can see on the left here, we have the emulsion percentage in 5% increments. And then to the right there on the chart, you can see that as you add more emulsion to this blend, it reaches a point to where somewhere around, that 45% to where that's the densest that our product will achieve. That means you've filled in all the voids between those individual ANFO prills now, and they're all filled, and you've made it a water resistant product. Any more emulsion that you add to that, our emulsion being a 1.25, you're adding a 1.2 more of a 1.25 product to the maximum density product of a 1.3-ish, 1.31. So your density will flatten back out. The more emulsion you add past 40%, all the way to once it reaches 100%, be back to our 1.25 density. So going up, the curve is pretty steep till you reach 40%, 40 to 45%, and then it'll slowly flatten back out to our 100% emulsion density. So just wanted to show you that, the effects of adding more, how the emulsion affects the density up to a certain point. And that's the same for most any manufacturer's emulsion. We're just using our density chart. This just kind of breaks it down into the typical blends that are loaded here in the Powder River Basin. 30, 40, 50% emulsion blends are going to be in that range. We still do actually have that density chart that I just showed you. We all have to remember, and you see that asterisk down there at the bottom of this slide, is your density of a blended product is going to vary some based on the prill density. In other words, if you receive AN that has a lot of fines in it, well, the density of that AN is going to be higher, which in turn is going to make your blend density higher. If you get real clean prill, then you'll probably be on the low end of the spectrum because there's not a lot of fines in there. So you'll have a better prill, so you probably have a little bit lower density. So when people ask us from time to time, what is the density of this blend or that blend? We've transitioned to where we kind of give them a range because that's the truth, that's the real world, and that's actual. It's based on the prill density, and we don't take prill densities every day. But normally speaking, it does fall within a certain range based on the percentage of fines in there. So this is kind of showing you a range of what you can pretty much bank on a day-to-day basis, unless the prill's really, really bad and the density of it is really, really high by itself. These are some typical densities of our normal and typical blends in the Powder River Basin. I think, Keith, I'll just keep going into this charge weight per foot here while we're this far along. So how do I calculate the pounds in 1 foot of blast hole? Again, we kind of covered this earlier, just breeze through it, but now we'll get down to the specifics. So you take your borehole diameter squared times 0.3405, and that number is 0.3405, no matter, that's a constant. So you have your diameter, whatever diameter, and then you have the last one there times D. D is your density. So if it's ANFO, it's probably about a 0.82 out here, up to our straight emulsion, sensitized emulsion at a 1.25 density. So that's the calculations to find out how many pounds per foot you're loading in the blast hole. So we'll take this one here real quick. We've already seen this, so we know the answer to this, but we'll still, for the exercise purposes, we'll go ahead and do this. So it's diameter squared, right? So we got 9 squared times 0.3405. Well, I didn't change this. I proofread this and I missed that. I got 1.32 instead of 1.3. Sorry about that. I'll have to make a note to correct that. So anyway, that calculates out to, let's use 1.3 to 36 pounds a foot in this. So you're probably loading a 40% blend here based on our densities. Try another one. So this brings up an interesting, well, we'll get to that here in a second. So again, it's borehole diameter squared. So you say, well, so now all I hear is 9 7/8. Okay, well, so how do you get that number that you've got down there in your problem? Well, you take 7 divided by 8 is 0.875. So you have to convert that from a fraction to just a whole number. So that's how you come up with 9 7/8 gets converted to 9.875, just to review that real quick. You square that, that comes up to 97.5 times your constant of 0.3405 times your ANFO density of 0.82 and this equates to 27 pounds per foot. We'll do one more here. 10 5/8 loaded with a product with a density of 1.2. So again, you divide 5 by 8 and you get 0.625. So 10.625 squared is 112.9 times your constant of 0.3405 times the density of this product at a 1.2, and that yields us 46 pounds per loaded foot. And for all these cast blasters out there, we'll do one more here. A 12¼ inch blast hole being loaded with 100% emulsion that has a density of 1.25. So again, 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. So 12.25 squared is 150 times 0.3405 times our density of 1.25, and that yields us 64 pounds per loaded foot. Okay, Keith, maybe we'll just stop there and see if there's any questions or comments.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions, comments? All right, I think everyone's good.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we're about halfway through my 80 minutes here. Did you want to see if anyone needs a break, Keith, or do we just want to keep moving here?
Rio, what would you like to do?
Let's take a 5-minute break. Be back in about 2 or 3 minutes past the hour.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started again. Do we have you, Bobby?
Yes.
All right, great.
Okay, we'll move on now to the allowable maximum charge weight per 8 milliseconds. There's a lot of history behind this that goes back. I think it was the 70s. Brad probably knows the answer to that for sure. But so the Office of Surface Mining, obviously, to try to protect structures, particularly those protected structures such as your neighbors, that's not on your permit area. They came up with this 8 millisecond rule. Today, with the introduction of electronic detonators since the early 2000s, at least, with the accuracy there, we've, in a lot of our studies and field tests and a lot of the things that our technical group does and other technical groups with other companies has found out that, really the 8 millisecond rule was a good place to start, but as technology improves, then adjustments could be made to this 8 millisecond rule, but that's the rule we have today. So we need to know what is our maximum number of pounds that we can detonate within any 8 millisecond window. So the formula for that, as you can see here, is your maximum charge weight is going to equal the distance to the nearest protected structure divided by a scale distance factor, and we'll look at that in a second, and then you square that number. So these are the scale distance factors, just the typical scale distance factor that we use today as we determine our maximum charge weight per 8 milliseconds. So you have your various distances, then you have the associated scale distance factors. And this was set up so that if you follow these guidelines, the maximum peak particle velocity that your seismographs should read is located there on the right-hand side of the slide. So you shouldn't exceed those peak particle velocities if you use this formula to determine your maximum charge weight per 8 milliseconds. Now, while we're on this slide, there are certain instances where a regression analysis is conducted and performed by those responsible for the blasting as they say get near to power lines, or maybe a pipeline, or maybe a railroad track, or there could be other circumstances too, but those are the three primarily that I've ever dealt with. And so you can modify the scale distance factor based on if you're allowed a higher vibration level, or if you need to actually have a lower peak particle velocity. You can modify that scale distance factor for certain situations, but that takes some studies to determine what that scale distance factor might be. There's also some formulas that we're not going to cover today for a modified scale distance factor, but day in and day out, we'll be using these formulas. So a couple of examples here of a protected structure that's 7,500 feet from the blast area. And so that's above 5,000 feet. So with 5,000 feet and above, you're using a scale distance factor of 65. So we're taking our distance to that protected structure, dividing it by our scale distance factor of 65. That gives us 115. So if we square 115, that calculates that we have the ability to load up to just over 13,000 pounds detonating within any 8 millisecond window. And then for close-up distance, I just used it should be 300. I didn't change that. I got two slides I got to change. I'm making a note here. Sorry. So we're using a distance of 300. 300 feet divided by the scale distance factor of 55 gives us 5.5. So if we square 5.5, that calculates that we're allowed to have 30 pounds detonating within any 8 millisecond window. So as you can see, the closer you get to a protected structure, your maximum allowable charge weight gets reduced quite a bit. So the one thing I want to talk about, this gets back to borehole rise, and that is a lot of my history of 40 years or whatever now has been that when your body, as Tony talked about this morning, have a tape in the hole, and you say, well, I put 1,000 pounds in here and it should have been, you know, left me with 20 foot of stemming, but I got 22 foot of stemming, or I came up with 18 foot of stemming, and I wanted 20. Well, we found out a few things over the years, that sometimes the first thing that gets blamed is the bulk truck. Well, your truck's out of calibration. And I feel like those of us in the servicing industry across the board keep an eye on the calibration of our trucks, and we expect that our operators are the first ones that might be able to sense something, because they know how many pounds they can offload. And if their truck says they got off noticeably more or less than what that truck is capable of, that's the first sign that your truck's out of calibration. But back to the original point, we found out in a lot of instances that one day everything's going great, we're hitting within a foot of our desired stem height, because we know boreholes are not perfectly round. They're not 10 5/8. They're not 9-inch exactly. It's not like you're loading into a PVC pipe. But drill bits, when you put a new drill bit on, or when you have a worn drill bit, as opposed to a drill bit that's maybe mid-life, then that's going to affect your borehole rise, because the hole is going to be a little larger. A new one should be pretty close to what it says it is, but as the bit wears, then typically you're going to have a smaller borehole. We have a drill bit in our office taken off of a drill here in the Powder River Basin, because we had this come up where they said, man, we should be getting, you know, hitting this stem height, and we're coming up too high. Well, guess what? A few days later, they changed the bit on this one drill that was drilling this pattern, and it was a claw bit, and one of the outer receptors for those replaceable teeth had broken off. So it was not the diameter that it was supposed to be. So we checked the calibration on the trucks and went through all that before they changed the bit. Well, once they changed the bit, we saw that, this is probably the culprit. They put a new bit on and we're where we needed to be. So that's one factor. And as I mentioned, the blast holes aren't perfectly round. And the geology that you're drilling has a lot to do with that, as far as maintaining a consistent diameter throughout the blast hole from the collar to the bottom of the hole. And again, we mentioned this earlier, your pre-oil density is going to affect the overall density if you're loading a blended product. So that's going to change a little bit. The deeper the hole, the more it will affect your stem height based on the number of pounds you load. So that's another factor. And as Tony mentioned again this morning, we expect a tape to be in the hole as we're loading it, just to ensure that we don't overload a hole. Again, that causes you problems with fly rock, air blast, and you know, the expense of having to call in a vac truck to vac that stuff out is not cheap. So always keep a tape in the hole as you're loading. I guess, Keith, any questions or comments on that little short section?
doesn't look like at this time we've received any questions or anyone's had any comments.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to explosives coupling. So essentially, the definition of explosives coupling is, I'll just back up here, is the consistent, intimate contact of the explosives column with both itself and the interior of the blast hole. That's explosives coupling. And we'll go over some of the things that to keep in mind as you talk about explosives coupling. In other words, you don't want, none of us want, the only time we want our explosives column to separate is if we're decking, whether it's inert decking or air decking. We want our explosives column to remain intimately in contact with itself, okay, and with the blast hole. So there are some operations, maybe not so much here in the PRB, that use packaged products, right? So your explosive is in a package, and typically the pictures you're seeing here, they'll use a packaged product because there's water in the blast hole. So they'll use a water resistant, typically straight emulsion, to load into the blast hole until at such point the top of that packaged product is above the water line. And then, as a general rule, or you should at least, take one more of those packaged product bags, split the top in 3 or 4 places, and then you can deposit that into the blast hole so that the top then is able to mushroom out and seal off the blast hole. And that will allow you then to load the remainder of your explosives column with ANFO is typically where I see this in this area anyway. However, as you can imagine, so if the blast hole is say 4-inch in diameter, well, typically then they're going to load the packaged product of 3-inch, because you don't want to load a 4-inch product, packaged product, in a 4-inch hole, because if there's any distortion of that hole to where it's not it's slightly less than 4 inches, then you won't be able to get your packaged product to the bottom of the blast hole. So the packaged products are always a smaller diameter than the diameter of your blast hole. So what I want to show here is the charge weight per foot of using a packaged product. Okay, and this packaged product is going to be our sensitized emulsion with a specific gravity of 1.25. So back to our calculations, we're going to calculate the charge weight per foot using a 3-inch packaged product. Okay. So we're going to take our 3-inch diameter squared, which is 9, times 0.3405, which is our constant, times our density of 1.25. Okay, so you can see here we have a 4-inch hole, but we're loading a 3-inch package product in there. So that means you don't use your hole diameter here, you use your explosives diameter. So we always talk about, well, diameter. Well, that's the diameter if you're loading bulk. If you're using packaged product, we should say explosives diameter is what we should say. So if you're loading bulk in a 4-inch hole, well, you use 4 inches. But if you're loading 3-inch packaged product, well, your charge weight is 3 inches. So that yields us just under 4 pounds per loaded foot with the packaged product. Let's see the difference if we load this same hole with bulk emulsion. So as you can see here, now we're using the explosives diameter is 4 inch because we're loading bulk. So that's yields us 6.8 pounds per foot. So the point I wanted to make here is if you know you're going to be loading a lot of packaged product, you should design your powder factor using the diameter of your explosives packaged product, not your whole diameter, because that's you can see the difference there. There's 3 pounds per foot difference. You know what powder factor is required to give you the fragmentation you're looking for. So if you've been loading bulk and then you switch to package, then keep that in mind, because the results may be certainly be, depending on the geology, the results may be noticeably different because you're not getting the powder factor that you think when you load packaged product. So again, explosives coupling, loading bulk products provide complete coupling when loaded into dry or dewatered blast holes. Want to make, as you can see, I'm talking about dry or dewatered blast holes, because if we go to the second one here, so if you attempt to load bulk products through water, that can result in decoupling, particularly in vertical blast holes. A lot of the cast blasts that we have out here and other places in the country, they drill angles. So you're augering a water resistant product into that blast hole. So it's sliding down the blast hole on the bottom side. So it allows the water to flow up over the top as it's going down the blast hole. But in vertical holes, you don't have that capability because it's vertical. So you can certainly get some decoupling when you attempt to load water resistant products in vertical blast holes. There'll be some water entrapped in the powder column. It can cause a complete misfire, or it can just shoot low order if there's just a small amount of water that's decoupling that explosives column. So and as we mentioned earlier, if you're loading packaged products, use the cartridge diameter to calculate your powder factor, because that's what's doing the work for you. Okay, Keith, I guess before we get into some of these calculations, if there's any questions or comments on any of those particular slides about explosives coupling.
Any questions or comments? It doesn't appear we have any. We're good to go.
God, I didn't know I was explaining stuff that well today, but no, that's good. If anyone does have any questions or comments later, and you want to contact me, then Rio has my contact information as far as email goes. So just send me an email. I'll be glad to discuss that with you on there. Okay, so now we'll move into some calculate. I think I got four calculations. So I'll just leave this up here, and we'll give it about, we'll give it 3 or 4 minutes or whatever here, so that you can have the time to do these calculations. So I've given all the parameters here, the diameter, burden spacing, depth, bench height, the product density, the stemming in this case. So let's just take 2 or 3 minutes, whatever here, and calculate our pounds per foot, the pounds that would go into this particular hole, and then the powder factor that would yield. So we'll give it 2 or 3, 4 minutes here. Okay, so our pounds per foot was going to be our diameter, charge diameter. In this case, we're loading bulk products, so it's the whole diameter. So 9 times 9 is 81 times 0.3405 times 1.3, and you can round off if you wanted to. It calculates out. I just had 36 pounds per foot. So our pounds per hole, so our hole depth was 50 and our stemming's 21. So that leaves us a 29-foot powder column. So at 36 pounds per foot times 29 feet, so yeah, 1,040 pounds. So what's our powder factor? Well, to do that, of course, we got to know our cubic yards in this hole. So obviously 30 times 30 times 50. And we'll divide that by 27. It gives us 1,667 cubic yards. So it's our pounds divided by our cubic yards. And that'll give us a 0.62, 0.63 powder factor. Okay, a little different scenario here, a slightly larger diameter. We have those parameters. So here we'll calculate our pounds per foot, our pounds per hole, and then in the third scenario here is going to be our stem height. So we'll just take a couple, 3 minutes and work through this.
And Bobby, when you do want to have another break for questions, I do have one that we've received.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I think we'll go through these calculations because this will end my presentation, Keith. And
Okay.
then we'll field any questions or comments. Yeah, I think that'd be great.
All right.
Yeah, this one's going to require a little more calculations to figure out some of these. It's kind of throwing you a little curveball here. Okay. So this one we had a little bit of a curveball for us. So the pounds per foot is the same thing, right? So we take 9.875, square that, times 0.3405, and times our product density of 1.17. That gives us, we'll just say 39 pounds a foot. So now how many pounds should go in this hole? So we'll take we got to find our cubic yards here because we know our powder factor. So we're going to go 28 by 32 by 50, divide that number by 27, gives us 1,659. And our powder factor is 0.67. So if we multiply that times 0.67, that gives us our pounds of basically 1,112. So now we know that. What should our stem height be? So we got that many pounds, and we had what, 39? I'm just going to round that to 39 pounds a foot. Gives us 28, basically 28 and a half, whatever. So we take 50 minus our powder column of 28 and a half. So yeah, about 21 and a half feet of stemming. So we kind of went the back door to get some of those answers there. Okay, do another one here. Diameter of 10 5/8. Again, that's 5 divided by 8 gives us 0.625 to convert that. Burden spacing, there's our parameter. So pounds per foot, pounds per hole, and powder factor. Okay, so again, pounds per foot, diameter squared, or charge diameter squared, we're loading bulk, so it's the whole diameter, times 0.3405 times the product density of 1.3. I just rounded mine off to 50 pounds per foot. Then our pounds per hole. So we have a bench out. So this here, we've got some sub drilling. So, and that's in another slide presentation I had that covers sub drilling, which we don't do here in the PRB. Rock quarries, I say, should always be doing sub drilling to maintain their design bench height. So we have a hole depth of 83. So we know how many pounds per foot. Now we need to know how many feet of powder column that we're going to have. So we're going to take the 83 and we're going to divide minus the 24 feet. gives us a 59-foot powder column. And I just said I use 50 pounds a foot. And I came out with 2,950 pounds in that hole. Okay, so now we need to know our cubic yards to get our powder factor. So we take our burden of 31, multiply times our spacing of 33, times our hole depth of 83, divide that by 27, and then you can divide, so 31, 44, 45, and then you divide that number into your pounds. So 2950 divided by 3144-ish is going to give us, well, depending on which number if you round or not. So it's going to give you somewhere between a 0.94 and this here 0.97 powder factor. Okay, our last exercise, we have a 12.25-inch diameter hole here. We have those parameters, and we'll look for the same information here: pounds per foot, pounds per hole, and powder factor. Okay. Again, hole diameter squared times 0.3405 times 1.3 in this particular product gives us 66.43. I just said, yeah, I said 66.4. Pounds per hole. So for those of you who's not involved in cast blasting, you probably looked at this and went, this is kind of weird. We got a bench height of 160, but our hole depth's only 140. Well, this is a cast blast application, and usually on the face row, maybe the face row and one more probably, to protect the coal in these cast blasting operations, because you've got so much energy. As you can see, we've got over 7,000 pounds in this one hole. We have to protect the integrity of the coal seam, so we have to stay off of the top of the coal seam a certain distance, and it varies a little bit from mine to mine in this area, but typically 20 is a good number to use. So that's why you see your hole depth being so much shallower than your bench height. So anyway, we'll have about 66 pounds per foot. So we're going to use our hole depth of 140, because that's what we're loading into, and we're going to subtract our stemming of 30. that gives us a 110-foot powder column times our 66.4 is what I'm using. So that gives us 7,304 is what I got, but 7,306 if you want to use that 0.43, that's fine. So there's our pounds for that hole. So now, of course, we have to find out our cubic yards to determine our powder factor. So we got, in this particular case, what they did to achieve this answer here of a 1.15 was they actually used the hole depth instead of the bench height. So if you use the entire overburden volume, which is the bench height, to get down to your coal seam, then I came out with an even 1 powder factor. However, we're not doing that in this particular scenario. We're just using our hole depth to get the blasted powder factor. So again, that's burden times spacing times our hole depth of 140. So that gives us about 6,352 cubic yards. So take the 7,304, 5 or 6 pounds, whatever you used, and divide that by your cubic yards of your hole depth cubic yards, and that'll equate to about a 1.15 powder factor. So there's other calculations that we could have covered, but I figured this was the basic ones. I mean, a lot of you don't want we hope that our operators are checking their fuel percentage and their ANFO components. There's a calculation for that. There's a few other little calculations that we could have covered, but I figured I'd try this today to see how that blended in with our time frame, and I think we did pretty good here, Keith and Rio. I think we can have a couple minutes here for any questions.
Sure, yeah, we did have one question from Thomas Hunter. This is all good information. Could you explain the correlation between powder factor and fragmentation between different material being shot?
I think Thomas, what you're asking is powder factors, let's just say for this geology in the Powder River Basin, and let's just say geology like in a limestone quarry, or maybe in copper or gold where they have actual hard rock. I think that's the question you're asking. So to answer that question, I'll just put it, I guess I'll put it this way, is the harder the material, then to get the proper fragmentation that most people want, usually that powder factor is going to be about twice what we typically see here in our bench blasting, not our cast blasting, but those harder material geology operations, they're bench operations, not cast blasting. And so, yeah, their powder factors generally are going to be twice what we typically load here on one of our overburden benches. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much, Bobby. Do appreciate your time. And we're going to just go straight into our next presentation with Brad Brown. Brad, I hope we have you.
Yep, you got me ready to go.
Great.
Look at that.
I have shared the screen with you, so whenever you're ready.
There we go. Show my screen. You should see a smiling face in the lower left there. It's about as grim as you get when you take one of those corporate pictures. I wanted to just touch on a few things here. The simple stuff, scale distance, and my focus there was just the things that are typically on the blaster's tests. If we have time, and I'm going to leave it to Rio and Keith to rein me in there, I can jump forward into some of the vibration basic stuff to see what we got. First thing to do is to get rid of some of the stuff we don't want to cover in this. There's some good information on air blast and so on in the blast timing, delay timing presentations, and there's also some more stuff coming up that a number of people will talk about on the air blast. Suffice to say, the explosive energy released into the atmosphere does not do us a lot of good. That's what really gets the neighbors, and that's a part that we as blasters need to address, but there are a number of other ways to do that. I pulled the chart out of the Wyoming regs from a few years back and said, look, yeah, you get regulated there on the decibel level, the limits that you have for air blast, but the guts of it is you've got to look at the design, how you're containing that energy, how you're confining that energy, the timing of it, and then exercise due care for the neighbors. So that's about as far as I really want to go with air blast, but we can take on some questions and things down the road. On the explosive in the ground side of things, the green, the upper things, the crushing, the cracking, the shearing, and the mass movement, that's all to our benefit. And in fact, Bobby's talking a little bit in there about shearing. I use his powder factor per foot. I talk about that as a shear factor. And it is literally a foot of product, so you can do burden times spacing times 1 foot of depth and do that calculation that he's doing. That's a very good calculation to see how it's going to move down at the bottom, for example, where you've got a maximum load. The green stuff is all to the good. The red stuff, the heat and light, does us no good at all, gets the neighbors, gets everybody wound up. The ground vibration costs you time, money, and everything else. And again, air blast is in there. You're not getting any benefit out of the energy you're buying. So we want to focus the right amount of energy in the hole. Most of us out here in the basin have something that looks like this out ahead of us: oil wells, some structures, some gas works, things like that. To the east, you tend to be more into the pipelines and houses and stuff in close. We've got rail lines and we've got bridges and we've got things like that around. Power plants, towers, pipelines, as I said, all these kinds of things that are limitations for our blasting. They really don't want us shaking this stuff, and we typically encroach on these as the mines get bigger and bigger or progress. The other one there, the houses, and whether it's just a fixer-upper like this, everybody out there thinks of it as a castle, and they'll tell you there wasn't a crack in it before you people started doing something. So the goal here is to look at how to protect yourselves, how to protect your neighbors, and that's largely around understanding the scale distance business. I've got some stuff on calculating vibration and limits, meeting the limits, and then moving those things a little bit, and close with just some basics on vibration issues. I think we're time limited, but we'll get to it. Scale distance. Bobby's been really focusing there on all the calculations with explosives and powder factor, and everything there has units. Scale distance is a weird one there because it's just a number relating weight and distance. It's based on feet, distance to the nearest structure in feet, and pounds, the weight of explosives per 8 millisecond window that he talked about. But it's coming out with a relationship, a scale distance number. It's typically what you report on your blast reports. It's what you're going to be measured against when somebody comes in to inspect your reports and how you're doing, or when somebody says, we got a complaint, what was your scale distance on that? But you're talking about something that you report, and it is also conservative. Ken will tell you from the OSM side, when they did all this work in the late 60s into the 70s, when David Siskin was making his mark, this was the easiest thing that they could do with the technology at the time, and it gave the blasters a good, simple, but conservative way to protect themselves and to protect the neighbors. Basic equation, scale distance equals the distance to the structure of interest divided by the square root of the weight per 8 millisecond delay. And I've used this notation in here because, and I kept it consistent because that's what the fonts on this screen tend to do for me. So there's a scale distance equation that way. I use this triangle. I'll tell you, it's a creature of habit with me. I've got distance on top here. SD is scale distance, and I've got square root of the weight. And I like the triangle because it gets me the right orientation for these factors. We only really calculate a scale distance on a blast report. A lot of times we're going to calculate a safe distance, what we call a safe distance, or a safe weight. And if I use this formula, or this triangle for the formula, it says that, look, scale distance is D over that square root of weight. The safe distance is scale distance times because they're right across from each other, the square root of the weight. On a safe weight, you manipulate D over SD. You flip the square root sign over to the other side, and so on. We'll see it here in a second. But I like the triangle because it gets me the orientation of these things. Rio says in his exam, he gives you a formula sheet, but a lot of people will see me writing this kind of thing down in the corner of the page as fast as I sit down. Rearranging the equation, I said safe weight is that distance to the structure divided by the scale distance, whatever you're allowed, and the quantity squared. The safe distance there is that scale distance factor times the square root of the weight. So you rearrange these things to suit your purpose when you get going in there. Typically, guys are doing a lot of calculating of the safe weight because they're working on a hole size. They're working on the number of holes per delay, and you had to change the timing, or they're working on a hole depth. The bench is getting deeper, for example, that kind of thing. Or for some of us in our neighborhood, we may have a choice on how deep we want to shoot. If we have a 200-foot bench, the question might be, how deep a bench can I shoot next to that substation and still not be over my weight per delay? So we might actually design our shot depth based on this kind of equation. And there we are there. Bobby, you got me with another typo in there. Weight should be D over SD quantity to the square. Okay? A safe distance one, different situation out here or in a lot of places. You may have a pipeline job or a ditching job where you're approaching some houses. That's where your distance to the structure can change. The blast actually is getting closer and closer day by day. Shooting pole holes, power pole holes, and things like that, you may be getting closer and closer to a development area or something like that. And of course, mine advances as we move towards a pipeline, move towards wells, things like that. We're going to want to be calculating the distance, the safe distance, for a given scale weight and a weight per hole we're running with there. So a couple of different ways to use it and a couple of scenarios for it. So there we go. We're looking there at a blast coming that way and another blast coming in, whether these are pole holes with a ditching shot that he showed earlier, coming in closer and closer and closer. Sooner or later, you're going to get too close, and that's where you want to be sure of what your limits are. Something else that I've plugged in here because it gets me tangled up, and from time to time it gets people in a class tangled up there. The statement, lower is less restrictive. Yes, that is true here. And the way I test that at times, because I just get muddled on it, that's me, I'll say, look, I've got a distance from a shot and choice of scale distances of, say, 5 or 16, and I picked them because the math was easy. What happens here if I use these things? I'm using the weight equation, D over SD, quantity squared. If I plug that in with a scale distance of 16, it says we can shoot about 3,900 pounds per delay. If I use the scale distance of 5, it says I can shoot almost 40,000 pounds out there, which tells you, again, the lower number is less restrictive. And I'll do that from time to time to see which side of the line I'm on, where I'm going to get myself into trouble. You get used to it after a while, but sometimes you just got to check it. The DEQ basics, this is the Wyoming stuff, and it comes from the OSM Blast Guidance Manual. Essentially 3 ways to limit vibration, and they're all based on your blasting plan. Now, the blasting plan is a technical document you put out, and it may have different rules than what starts in the guidance manual, the basic guidelines, those kinds of things. Take a look here and see what we got. Scale distance and PPV, scale distance limits, subject to modifications, and PPV, peak particle velocity limits. Okay, the first part. Here's the numbers that Bobby was talking about that he showed in there, 0 to 300 feet. You've got a vibration level, a PPV limit, and you've got a scale distance limit. And use this generally when you don't have something else out there. Okay, so you pick off a distance in excess of 5,000 feet, right away you know, in the absence of anything else, scale distance to 65 is what might apply. Okay, next part. Method 2, this is typically a little more common for structures. For example, I was saddled with this years ago in a different life, different job role. Scale distance had to be greater than 65 for the inhabited structures I was looking at, and for the wells, pipelines, bridges, abutments, those kinds of things, I was looking at a scale distance had to be in excess of 16. And that was written into our permit, what we actually lived with. Or by a variance. You could get a variance and you could shift those numbers. More on that in a bit. Then the third part of it is getting real fancy, is going to the PPV chart. And here's one version of it. And it says, look, at given particle velocities and frequencies, you want to stay below the line. You start getting the specs in there from your seismograph above the line, you got troubles. So those are essentially three ways to get at the thing. From the DEQ regs again, here we are, they show distance, they show that PPV stuff, show the scale distance numbers there. That's method one. That stuff is method one, and there's some provisos in there. Method two is down here, using the scale distance equation, and essentially saying, look, calculate that scale distance, d by distance divided by the charge weight per delay, or rearrange it and so on. You can do this stuff, and you may change it up with approval and so forth. But that's method two in the regs, and the stuff in the middle is not complete in terms of method three, but it's getting pretty close, saying, okay, monitor vibration with a seismograph and meet these requirements, and you're good. I'll let Rio clean up anything there that I've missed. So the simple stuff, and here's one for you guys with your calculators. Scale distance problem, these are all word problems, and the trick is to pull out what it is that's in there and what you know. Mine typically fires 7,000 pounds per hole, 1 hole per delay. Nearby home, 5,800 feet away. Is this allowed under Wyoming DEQ regulations? Well, first thing I do in these word problems is figure out what it is I know. I'm using 7,000 pounds per delay, because I said 1 hole per delay. I've got 5,800 feet spec'd in here. What's my scale distance? What's my limitation on this? And if I go to the tables, because I'm not told anything else, then I can start to do my math. So I've got 5,800 feet, 7,000 pounds. That tells me it's a scale distance of 65, but if I do the math here with those numbers, I get a 69. So right away, if I had not reminded myself, I'd say, hey, am I on the right side of it or the wrong side? I'm on the right side. Yes, I can do this. It is allowed. My scale distance is higher than a 65. You want to check it, you can look at your maximum weight at 65. That's D over the scale distance quantity squared. You say, hey, the law says in the absence of anything else using that 65, you'd be allowed to shoot 7,900 plus pounds. So again, yes, I'm legal. I'm only shooting 7,000 pounds. I'm getting a 69 out of it. Here's what I'm allowed. There I am. Load it, book it, report it, and you're good. Next one. You have a scale distance of 16. This has been told to you. You have a scale distance of 16 for a structure 800 feet away from your next blast. How many pounds can you shoot per delay? And of course, it's got to be legally. So again, the word problem, you're given a scale distance of 16. You know a distance is 800 feet. So this is a safe weight calculation. So you break out your calculator, you know your 800 feet, the scale distance is 16. You use that safe weight calculation right there, which is distance divided by scale distance quantity squared, 800 over 16, 2,500 pounds per delay is what you're allowed to shoot. And like in Bobby's problems and so on, you start to figure how many pounds per hole, how many holes you can shoot, that sort of business. But 2,500 pounds per delay or less is what you're required to be compliant on this case. Third one, not too different, but close enough. Which situation is more restrictive? This one, I've got two structures to worry about. I've got the scale distance of 65 at 2,500 feet away. So I've got an inhabited structure out here of some sort, 2,500 feet. And I've got scale distance of 15 because they've got a different reg, they've got a different requirement in their permit, 550 foot away to a well. So two different limits, two different distances. The job is to calculate and see which one it is that's most restrictive and then design your blasting according to that. So you pull out your calculator, and I'm a big one for writing down what you know. Distance, 550 feet, scale distance of 15, okay? D over SD, that quantity squared, comes out, gives me 1,344 pounds per delay, okay? This other one out to the structure, I'm using a 65 in here, 2,500 feet, but I'm using a 65 because they spec'd that for me. They said your limit is 65. Okay, we're off the tables. We're going by what's written in the permit or whatever it is that said you will abide by this. Plug it in, work the numbers through, 2,500 divided by 65, and that quantity squared, just shy of 1,500 pounds per delay. So what's the most restrictive situation here? It's over here, this 1,344. You've got to abide by this well that's in close when you're doing your design work. So again, figure out how many pounds per hole or how many holes per delay, those kinds of things, but you're limited to 1,344 pounds per delay to meet the spec at that well. And those are the typical kind of problems that you'll get on most of the exams. I'll let Rio comment if there's something else that he'd like to see there, but those are the things you should also be practicing. Calculate the scale distance to put on the report, but calculate safe weight when you're designing a shot, or to check what you've loaded when you're picking the timing, or check how many pounds you're allowed, this kind of thing, or what distance you can get to protect yourself. Okay, so in terms of checking, you want to calculate a designed and an actual powder factor, and talk about column build. Like I said, getting the right amount of product in the holes there. You might want to look at the depth and the orientation of those holes to keep things under control and reduce that vibration level. You might want to be looking at relief, again, to let the energy do the work it's supposed to do instead of blowing up in the air. Move the face instead of blowing up in the air, and timing issues and things like that. Then we move on, and we're talking then about monitoring and getting change restrictions and signature holes and some stuff like that. So this is where it steps off past the basic scale distance stuff and says, okay, how can you use PPV limits and things like that? Where to get some help? Ken Elsager was talking about vibration levels and how you set up your seismograph, and I love the stuff about being professional. Act like you're going to have to come back next week and you don't want to spoil the situation for your next visit. Know how to use the instrument, follow some of the field practice guidelines there, and there's some other documents on the website, on the SEE.org website, that'll tell you about minimizing air blast. There's also some pre-blast surveying materials there and some other tables and guides. But the big thing is, if you're going to start moving to a seismograph, know how to use it and look the part when you go out there to visit at the neighbors. Inside that field practice guideline stuff, beyond knowing your instrument, you have to be able to function with the thing there because they're going to be watching you and want to see what that fancy thing does. There's a lot of instruction in there on sensor placement and coupling, getting things right. Some ideas on programming and getting the trigger levels and the modes right, and also on air overpressure or air blast monitoring. So the blue stuff, that's in that guide. You should do it. The other stuff Ken's getting into there is, there's a couple of good videos out there. The SEE has some face-to-face greeting the homeowner and that sort of business. I'm pretty sure he had a good firm hand in that stuff. So a lot of good advice in there on it that's easy for you to get. Just go to the SEE website and start pulling down that stuff. I'll pause for a second for any questions on that, because that's the kind of stuff you get tested on.
Any questions or comments?
I see one from Ken here. Higher scale distance creates lower PPVs. Yep. Higher scale distance creates lower PPVs, or you could say it mandates lower PPVs. Remember that homeowner structure out there with a scale distance of 65? They are not going to tolerate a whole lot. The well will put up with a PPV of 2, 3, 5, and more. But that higher scale distance there creates lower PPVs. Anything else?
Doesn't Doesn't appear so.
Okay. Okay, real quick, a couple of things here on the PPV side of it and changing them. The general equation for particle velocity, peak particle velocity, is this K times that scale distance, which we were just using, times A. This is an actual measured or calculated scale distance you're using. K and A are ground constants that you can work with. One's an exponent, one's just a constant factor. You want to be able to get a bunch of points to generate these from a curve, and then you got to start testing in your environment. A good starting point that I've had for years was K is about 160 and A is a negative 1.6. And you just use those in the equation, multiply by scale distance that you might have calculated ahead of time, and you can guesstimate a PPV for a given shot. That low confinement pushes that K down into the 2-digit range. I've seen as low as 24. Average, the normal starting point out of the book is 160. K can go as high into the 250s and more for heavy confinement. That's just a function of your blasting. An easier way to look at it might be to go beyond, and I pinched this one from Ken from a while back there for the coal mines. Typically, you could see your K factors. He's shown here at about 120 up to 440-ish, and that exponent in there at about negative 1.52, that sort of stuff. Whatever it is, this is starting to fit to your ground conditions. And I've got some of that in here. If you produce a blast design and then go through, you can and with a bunch of shots, you can define the ground constants. You can find the weight limits to meet that PPV, and then you can do your loading plans. Now, I said design it here, and then I said design it here. So obviously, this is getting into an iterative approach where you're getting a lot of shots and a lot of data. And then the worst part of the deal is going to sell it to whoever owns the property, your boss or the neighbors or something else around there. But the idea is you do enough shooting, and here it says MSD, minimum scale distance. But it's the same thing we've been picking off. So you calculate scale distances, and you measure PPVs, and when you start to plot it, you get a goofy curve like this if it's not done in the log. But it essentially says, look, here's what the number looks like, and for a given scale distance design, you can read up and over and say that's what I might get in terms of PPV. If you do the math, and this is an old one from a previous life, you can get a best fit PPV that says, okay, about 70 times that scale distance to the negative 1.4. If you want to get very statistical and very careful about it, it pushes it up to about 130. There we're getting closer to that 160, 115. But it's a constant, a set of constants that work for your ground conditions. It takes a bunch of work to get there, but once you have it, then you can design accordingly. And you could say, okay, for given shots, given holes in a blast, for example, I used to be saddled with a vibration limit at the new high wall, the upper left. I could calculate and say, okay, I can limit the weight in each of the holes so that overall, as the thing fires, I don't have an exceedance of vibration at the new high wall. And it's working on the variations that I had with bulk products, the detonators, load limits, and trying to steer that information to the blasters to say, here's how we're going to meet what the geotech in charge of this property wants. The other way you can get at this, and it's more data collection there, is to get a data set. Now, first thing, and this comes from Doug Emmy, Rio's predecessor, he said he's typically never going to lower the limit for inhabited structure. It's just not politically good advice to let you shoot harder around neighbors. Okay? There are other ways to say it, but that's the fact. For other structures, piers, bridges, railroads, wells, whatever, collect the data set, determine what the local ground constants are, and then pass it on over to Rio or somebody and see if you can get scale distance reduced from maybe 16 to 15 to 14, whatever it is. A couple of tips. You want a bunch of data points. Doug used to say more than 50, but lots more is better for you. You want to get a wide range of distances, range of scale distances. A lot of instruments on one shot might help you, but they're all going to be using the same weight and about the same distance typically. So you want to be careful you don't get a whole cluster of data that doesn't tell you a whole lot. There's a bunch of data that we came from one job way back, and that had lots of data points, a good range of distances, So real close to real far, and scale distance in particular from single digit range well up there. Could have gone further on the high end, but whatever it is, you plot that sort of stuff and you want to start looking at it and say, hey, I've got a good range here, a little clustering maybe, but I've got scale distances out here in the sub 10 range, 7, 8, 9 kind of range there, and I'm out here to over 100 in terms of scale distances. So I've got a good range in there. Here's what my PPDs are, and you ship it off and say, hey, this is something we're working on. We would like to see a change in our scale distance factor here. Last thing, some vibration reduction work. I call it focus on the basics. And this goes to a lot of things that Tony said and that Bobby said, and chunks in there that Ken had in there. Biggest thing you can do on some of these shots to reduce vibration, to reduce the blowouts, fly rock, the complaints, things like that, and improve your performance generally, is to provide relief. Get the proper burdens in there. Do the measuring and the calculation ahead of time and put the holes where they need to be. It's harder to adjust it after the fact, but maintain proper burdens there. Reduce or remove the buffers, the stuff in front of the face that doesn't need to be there. It might be loose material, but it's still weight that you have to move if the toe's going to move. More than that, if it's water down in the pit, you know it's going to move, and you've seen videos where water moves really fast, does a lot of damage, but that's a buffer that's in there. Think about angle drilling. If you've got a toe that you've got to get under control, get the relief by considering the angle drilling and then manage the drilling. The other part, correct amount of sub-drill. For the guys that have to sub-drill, you don't want a seismic project going on where you've got too much explosive down in the ground that's never supposed to move, but you do want to have enough energy down there to break to grade, get that shear factor that maybe Bobby talked about. High energy toe, another way of saying the same thing. Another thing you can look at there to get the relief is different primer locations so that you're hitting the hardest rock, getting the good start on the explosive product where you need it, and then timing, get the material to move. Just some basic things that you can focus on there to get it rolling. They're all much better options than complaints. If you can tackle this sort of stuff up front, you should be able to reduce the complaints, and that's a much happier place for everybody to be. Okay, I have 3 problems again. Those are available as handouts up here on this website. You can download them and rework them to suit. At that point, I'm done. Anybody got anything else? Any comments, questions? Rio, it's up to you to mop up.
Brett, I have nothing. Thank you for your presentation.
It doesn't appear we have any additional questions. So Rio, I'll just hand it over to you.
Well, thank you for attending this first of its kind webinar, at least for state of Wyoming. I just have up on my screen contact information for me. I believe most of you have this already. Just as a reminder, please complete the affidavit of attendance if you would like credit for this. Please indicate if you want a attendance certificate. I can email that back to you. Hopefully this week or next week I can get that out. So any questions for me before we end this?
Doesn't look like we have any questions. Doesn't appear. Well, it looks like Brad actually has a question.
Okay.
Never let it go too easily there. 2 things on the powder factor calculations. And Rio, you tell me what you want, and the other testers can address it. 1, in the powder factor calculations, I'm pretty sure you're going to want to count the weight of the boosters in the hole for a total final weight, either in reporting or in your answers. It's only a couple of pounds, so it doesn't change powder factors a whole lot, but if you ask for a weight and you don't include it, I'm betting that'll get somebody into a bind.
Yes, you need to include boosters and powder factor calculation.
Okay, the other one, depends on where you are, but the bit about using the bench height, using the hole depth and things like that, I've had that in a range of people asking it, And what I typically said was, look, when you're calculating a powder factor and you're calculating things there, consider the explosives you use. If it's down in the subgrade, down in the subdrill, you ain't getting it back. Count all the explosives that you use in the shot, and then count the volume that you expect to dig from that shot when doing the powder factor. That's an overall powder factor. Now you can get more specific, like Bobby said, shear factor is taking it right down to pounds per foot, but generally you're going to want to use the weight of explosive you used and the volume of material you expect to dig.
That's correct. Yeah, and a lot of times your bench powder factor, burden spacing, bench height, you just use that. You can often have different powder factors if you look at the entire volume of the shot that you expect to dig. Slightly different.
That's it. Thanks very much, everybody.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. We'll have another webinar June 30th at 8:15 a.m. to 12:15 a.m. and that is Mountain Time. So if you'd like, if you don't have the link for that, please email me. I can send that over to you. And thank you, everybody.